Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. Ba-chan? What are you doing here? Oh, nothing Naru honey. Baby, why don't you go play with your friends elsewhere for the meantime? We're in the middle of the Chunin exams, TTEBAO. Yes, of course sweetheart. Now, let Ba-chan take care of this mean bad guy and we talk later. Better yet, let's have a date. Wah. No, Ba-chan, what are yo? Dove, we better. TSSSSSSNADEE. A squeezing sound was heard. Naruto. I think we can leave this to Tsunade Shishio. But, there was the echo of a crack in the air. Yeah, maybe you're both are right. It was in the second phase of the Chunin exams that Team 7, which consisted of 3 12-year-olds, standing on top of a large branch of a gigantic tree, came to the outstanding realization that they were not, in fact, confronting a fellow genin, much to their chagrin. What they came to face was an oddly looking snake person naming himself, or something, as far as Uzumaki Naruto, the whiskered blonde, was concerned. His teammates, though, seemed to recognize the name. Better if I ask them later. Well, he preferred to ask Haruno Sakura. He would much rather have someone pretty and smart talk about boring stuff than his brooding friend. Especially if he's going to go on a tangent about how he was going to kill someone he doesn't know. Anyways, the snake guy was giving his teammate, Uchiha Sasuke, odd looks. Licking his lips while saying stuff like, I want your body, and, you will be mine. Huh, the blonde thought, isn't this what Ba-chan always told me to look out for? What were they? Searching his mind for the right word, Naruto squinted his eyes a bit, putting a hand on his chin. Looking directly at the weird guy as if the answer would be written on his face. Dodge. It was Sasuke's yell that made him come back to reality, but it was too late. Or something extended his tongue and used it like a rope to tie his arms to his body, leaving him completely vulnerable. Gross. And that's when it came, the word that he was searching for. A pedophile. And with it, came the immediate reaction that his Ba-chan had drilled into him. It was involuntary. It was instinctual. It was primal fear overtaking his body. It was something that his Ba-chan had punched so hard into his skull so he wouldn't forget. This reaction was so imprinted into his being that even the fox in his belly yelled with him at the same time. Help! A pervert is touching me. Stranger danger. A pedophile is here. The pervert gave him a questioning look. His attention then went to the blonde's teammates. To the snake guy's surprise, they were sweating, not even registering the pervert's presence anymore. Sasuke went stiff as a rock, skin even more pale than it naturally was. His shirt went visibly wet with sweat. The snake could swear that he smelled a little pee in the air. Sakura was on the verge of crying, pupils glistening while her whole body trembled and her eyes were stuck on the ground, as if trying to avoid some really dark memories. Naruto came to himself, gone was his panic, and he could feel inside him a massively embarrassed fox that had just shouted with him. The blonde couldn't blame Kyuubi, his Ba-chan was that scary, but there's no way she had listened to his cry. Right? He had faith that this wouldn't be a repeat of that time when she blew a quarter of the village, but the thundering echoes that he heard at the distance were squishing his hopes. He knew, this would get ugly. It was between a breath that the pervert felt a shiver go through his spine, just as his tongue was smashed away and he was forced to let go of the blonde. And before he could react, a pressure that almost made his eyes pop was felt on his neck, squeezing his air pipes to the point that just existing was painful. Ba-chan? What are you doing here? In front of him was his Ba-chan, a gorgeous woman that didn't look older than 20. Her long blonde hair was collected in 2 low pigtails and a purple diamond painted on her forehead. Yet the feature that most people would remember about her would be her big heart that almost came out of her chest, pushing her breast practically out of her body. Right now, she was busy holding the snake by the neck. The view wasn't pleasant at all. That is, if you didn't have a grudge against the guy. Oh, nothing Naru honey. Baby, why don't you go play with your friends elsewhere for the meantime? Her voice was like a bell yet had the deepness of a mature and aggressive woman, soft and melodic. It made Naruto feel all warm and fuzzy sometimes. This is not the moment for that. We're in the middle of the Chunin exams, TTEBAO. Yes, of course sweetheart, she chirped. Now, let Ba-chan take care of this mean bad guy and we can talk later. She lifted her free hand and let one of her fingers go to her chin, tilting her head slightly while pursing her lips, A few seconds later, her eyes lit up and she gave Naruto a blinding smile. Better yet, let's have a date. The young blonde was baffled for a moment, not because of the date offer, that was something regular with his Ba-chan. But the timing. It was so off that it bothered him. He shaked his head, throwing away his confusion. Wah, no, Ba-chan, what are yo? Dove, we better. Sasuke interrupted his train of thought. Looking over the last Uchiha, Naruto could tell that the boy was doing his best not to faint. He was about to answer. Tssssssnadee. Or as something hissed out, his voice sounded like a croak. A squeezing sound was heard. Looking over his Ba-chan, the blonde saw how the snake pervert's skin color was turning into a sickening blue. He was wondering how his neck could still hold. His eyes were bloodshot and literally popping out. Sakura recovered from his trauma-like state next. Naruto. I think we can leave this to Tsunade Shishio. But, this time a crack sound interrupted him. Okay, he's definitely dead. Naruto made his own conclusion. And decided he didn't want to risk it. Yeah, maybe you both are right. In a blink, both of his teammates disappeared. Damn traitors. What happened to those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. So much for teamwork. Right, Ba-chan. See you later. He didn't hesitate, he ran away like a headless chicken. Clearly trying to ignore his Ba-chan answer of bye-bye honey. Love, ya. Accompanied by a bunch of kissing noises that she usually makes every time he says goodbye to her when he's in a hurry. And he definitely isn't blushing. Now to find those two assholes. Now, Tsunade's voice carried various promises, many of them decorated with pain. It made Orochimaru sweat, and, for the first time in many decades, he feared for his life. He squirmed with all his might, yet her hold didn't budge. He tried to Kawarami, but as soon as he moved his hands, Tsunade reached to his left one and squeezed it like his bones were made of noodles. Seeing that there was no other way out, he decided that it was appropriate to use his Orochimaru Ryu no Kawarimi no Jutsu. He would not need hand signs, and the element of surprise would leave him an opening to counter-attack. Yet, as soon as his new head peeked out from his former mouth, it was stopped. Oh no you don't. Her free hand immediately went to his forehead, and with the strength she was known for, Tsunade pushed him inside his old body. The snake never knew that staying inside of his old skin after doing the technique could be so uncomfortable. Tsssunadee. What are you doing here? The snake Sanin hissed. Well, I heard my baby calling for help because some. Her next words were spatted with a venom that Orochimaru had never seen on her old teammate, and considering he's talking about Tsunade, that's saying something. Disgusting pervert was touching him. It took a lot for Orochimaru not to scoff. The sole idea of him being a pervert, one even worse than Jiraiya, was ridiculous. Even so, he had to clarify something, just for the sake of it. I don't care about your brat, Haim. All I want is the Uchiha. Let me have him, and I will be out of your way. You can go play house all you want with Naruto-kun after that, and I won't bother you. A lie, obviously, the chance of getting a Jinchuriki, and an Uzumaki one at that. It was tempting, but not a priority. Orochimaru was satisfied with his answer. He thought that by promising not to bother her and her kin, she would be out of his shoe. Tsunade was a selfish person after all, and she had no reason to care about an Uchiha of all things. But it was the wrong thing to say, apparently. Are you saying my Naru-chan is not good enough for you? She asked in a calm manner, but the ominous aura that encased her was far from relaxing. No, wait, wah. Before he could even begin to process how she came to that conclusion, he felt a bone-chilling punch on his stomach. It sent him flying through the forest of death, his body breaking apart with every tree he destroyed during his fly until he finally collisioned with the ground. He skidded to a stop, his skin burning and his limbs crying for mercy. The pain, make it stop. He tried to replace his body with a new one again, but when he sighs in relief as half of his new body is out of his old skin, a foot is aggressively shoved on his spine. Where the hell do you think you're going? Tsunade glares over him as she cracks her knuckles, after saying my Naru-chan is not good enough. Trash like you. No, Haim, your brat is so good. Yes, SSS the best. It's him who I want. That only made his back make a crunch sound. His new spine has more than probably just broken. So you want him after all. You scum. A stomp, you disgusting, another stomp, perverted. Was he just smashed in half? Scum. His yells were drowned with the sound of the earth shattering, and the last thing he saw was how the sky was coming closer, yet he still felt the floor beneath him. How odd. He felt himself losing consciousness, being swallowed by the darkness. So much for immortality. And those were his last thoughts. Sarutobi Hiruzen was having a rather uneventful afternoon considering that today marked the start of the second phase of the Chunin exam. He was dealing with his usual duties, meaning paperwork, the elders, an unsatisfied clan head here and there. Just the routine. So, you could assume his surprise the moment he saw, looking through the window situated in his office, a fairly big portion of the training ground 44, otherwise known as the Forest of Death, ascended to the skies at a frighteningly quick pace. It was as if it was just thrown. He inhaled very deeply. Feeling his year more than ever, closing his eyes he tried to escape reality for a moment. Maybe I'm not the Hokage, or maybe this is all a dream. Yes. Obviously I just fell asleep while doing the paperwork. The world, it seemed, laughed at his self-proclaimed dreams. Hokage-sama. Anbu arrives as the Sandame's hopes are shattered. Hiruzen remains silent. Maybe if I ignore him, he will go away. He hopes. Hokage-sama. The Forest of Death. So he's not going away, it has been blown away. So, even if I don't say anything, he just keeps talking. Given the situation, we suspect it's Tsunade. I guess there is no way around it. With Naruto-kun at the exams, I can't say I'm surprised. There are times where he questions himself about the decision he made so many years ago. To think that just one action had so many ramifications. Your orders? The Anbu speaks, but receives no answer. After a few seconds, the masked fellow decides to lift his head to look at his leader. The man known as God Shinobi, the professor. The guy who rules this village and is considered the most powerful shinobi in all Konoha. The Sandame opens his eyes, with the countenance of a man who has achieved nirvana and has seen the truths of the universe. He speaks. Screw it, I'm retiring. Again, Sarutobi wonders about the day that fate changed. The day when that little whiskered blonde boy, son of Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato, Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, pariah of the village and known by few as the child of prophecy, came to him with a weird question and a simple request. Thinking about how it all ended, he really doesn't regret it. The air was moist and smelled damp. In the corner of a small attic there was a small figure, a blonde-haired 5-year-old, 3 whiskers adorning his cheeks on each side and a dirty old shirt protecting him from the cold. Whimpering slightly, he wondered why he was there. The orphanage matron had sent him there just that morning, saying something about a monster scaring the possible parents for the other kids. He questioned mentally, why was he a monster? What did he do? Why did every kid gets to eat every meal while he watched them with an empty stomach? His musings were interrupted by shy footsteps. He tensed up, thinking that maybe one of the personnel of the orphanage came to teach him a lesson, as they usually called those beatings. A few seconds passed until he realized that the tapping wasn't coming from within the attic, but from beyond the floor. Moving a little, he got to peek at the little hole placed between the wooden planks. I really find it weird. He heard a female voice, but he didn't make an effort in recognizing it. And I tell you, it's not worth losing your hair over it. But aren't you curious? This is the kind of thing that leads you directly to the T&I department. It won't if you don't rat me. Naruto found it curious, how these people, who were so cruel to him, could have such a normal conversation between them. It felt like the problem was him, not everybody else. His young mind came to the conclusion that someone up there must be adamant in being mean to him. I really don't see your point though. But no one else has the last name, Uzumaki. You Uzumaki? That's my last name. He realized, up to this point, that they were talking about him, but he didn't understand it really. I can think of someone else that had the last name, Uzumaki. Who? He understood something, although barely, and what he knew was that if someone else had your same last name, that made them family. Uzumaki Mito. Am I Mito? You mean the same Mito as the Shodem's wife? The very same. The Shodem? Is she talking about a Hokage? Like Gigi? The blonde inferred that they were talking about someone important by how the Shodem was mentioned. And he knew that the people referred to his Gigi as Sandame, which meant third. He jumped to the conclusion that if Gigi was the third, then there must have been a first some time ago. And his wife was my family? He went deaf to the rest of the conversation until something that caught his little heart by surprise was heard. Do you think Lady Tsunade is his relative? Wah? Of course not. His pudgy fingers made a fist and the beat of heart was thumping in his ears. Shoulders tensed as questions were created deep within his person. But if he really is an Uzumaki, then he is her relative. Look, you idiot, I'm pretty sure that there's another reason for him having that last name. The voices became small, as if they were walking away, but the impact they had on his young soul was scarring. I have to ask Gigi, if she's my family, then. Hope bloomed in the middle of that tiny and dark attic. Gigi. It has been a month since then, and the blonde jumped at the old man. Hiruzen was doing his monthly checkup on Naruto. Hugging the boy that he viewed as a grandson was one of the few things that relaxed the old Hokage. Though it worried him how thin and light he felt. Naruto-kun, how are you? The boy gave him a beaming smile as a reply. Even so, the Hokage will have to look into how things are faring for his little friend here in the orphanage. Gigi, can I ask you something? Of course, what is it? Not here, the blonde whispered. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow, but having the blonde pull his hand to his assigned room, he complied. He didn't like how bare it looked. There were 5 beds beyond the wooden door, yet they all seemed unoccupied, not to mention how dusty the air felt. As if no one besides Naruto was sleeping or cleaning this quarter. I will have to have Inu and Neko check on this. Nay, Gigi, the old man turned to the blonde again, seeing his shining blue eyes tug a few strings on his old tired soul. Naruto bit his lip and looked as if he was organizing his words. It must be important if he's putting so much care into it. Is Uzumaki my real last name? Sarutobi raised an eyebrow, not expecting that kind of conversation, though. He concluded that answering truthfully wouldn't really hurt. Yes, Naruto-kun, if there's something I'm sure of, it's that you're an Uzumaki through and through. He had the Uzumaki smile, not to mention the spirit and energy. Hiruzen would put his hand in the fire and bet that Naruto made all his ancestors proud by how much of an Uzumaki he was. If a love for pranks develops when he gets older, then you wouldn't even need a blood test to confirm he was an Uzumaki. Yeah, Naruto-kun is not only an Uzumaki by blood, he has the spirit of one too. Then, the blonde wasn't looking at the Hokage anymore. His thoughts in disarray and his heart on his throat. Small shoulders shake with newfound emotions. Hiruzen questioned internally why this would affect the young boy so much, but he would wait for him to speak. The silence converged in the room for a few minutes until his small infantile voice was heard. Do I have a family, Gigi? Hiruzen hated himself for having to answer that question. I'm sorry Naruto-kun, but I've told you already, your parents. No, that's not what I mean. Hiruzen's eyebrows creased at that. It seemed he didn't understand the question, so he nodded to Naruto to continue. I mean, I heard some of the women talk about the Shanda Shodem having a wife. Hiruzen nodded. And Uzumaki, and his pupils contracted. He certainly didn't expect this. Well, yes, Naruto-kun, that would be right. The Shodem's family, where are they? So, this is what it was. Of course, having heard that the Shodem's wife had his same last name, Naruto would think of her and her family as his own. And he wouldn't be so wrong. The Senju were distant cousins from the Uzumaki. Sadly, the Senju were in the same situation as the Uzumaki. Both clans had only one member each remaining. You mean the Senju, Naruto-kun. The Shodem was of the Senju clan. Yes, that thing. Where are they? They're my family, right? Yes, they are. He wanted to say, but it was an extremely complicated topic. And it would be harder to explain to a child. However, he tried. They kind of are, Naruto-kun. The way the eyes of the child were expelling stars from them just hurt the old Hokage. But there's just one remaining member of the clan. What? He could tell how the hopes and dreams of the kid came crashing, but his explanation wasn't done yet. She, Senju Tsunade, was my student. She left the village years ago. Naruto's short arms came down, lifeless, and tears started to come. She left me? No. He wanted to clarify this, vehemently. No, Naruto, she left the village because he felt uncomfortable telling his student misfortunes to a child. Tsunade will probably punch me if she hears about this. Even so, he reasoned that it was a necessary evil. She lost too many of her loved ones. The boy tilted his head, not comprehending why that had to do with her leaving the village. They died protecting the village, and she blames Konoha for taking them away from her. Even so, she understands that it was their wish. But it still hurts her to be here when they are not with her anymore. Hearing the explanation, Naruto looks down solemnly. He didn't understand how losing someone felt, but he knew that it would hurt if his Gigi wasn't there anymore. Yet, he was resolute. He wanted to at least try. Can I see her, Gigi? Hiruzen took a deep breath, looking for the right words to express this. She isn't in the village anymore, Naruto. I tried to tell her to come back, but she wouldn't listen. So, it would be hard for you to even get to see her. He nodded again, but the fire in his eyes didn't diminish at all. The boy was determined. She was his family, the only one he had left. I will get her, no matter what. Can I send her a letter? He said with a resolute tone. Naruto-kun, do you even know how to write? The Hokage answered with an amusing glint in his eyes. Maybe he can do it. Bring Tsunade back. A blonde, a brunette and a pig walk into a bar. This is not a joke, at least that's what Tsunade would like to think. You got a letter for me? An incredulous and slightly offended inflection came from her lips. How can you have a letter for me? I just arrived in this town. Don't ask me. The bartender raised both hands in surrender. The letter got here a few days ago. It doesn't have a recipient. It just says, to the blonde woman with the kanji of gamble on her back. You're the only one that fits that description since the letter arrived. And now Tsunade was curious. Whoever sent the letter must have known her and even more, knew about her habits and preferences. She could only think of 3 people that fit that description. And only one of them would go through a letter of all things to communicate with her. I guess Sensei wants to inform me of something that isn't that urgent. If it was urgent, she would have been contacted by Jiraiya. She really didn't want that. Give it then. The bartender provided her with the letter and washed his hand off the matter. Tsunade guided her party to a booth where they sat. Shizune eyed her master curiously while the pig in her arms oinked confusedly. The blonde beauty stared at the paper for a few minutes, as if expecting it to burn by her glare. Then sighed resignedly. In a swift move, the envelope was opened and the content dropped on the table. The Sannin grabbed the page that contained most words while Shizune seized a colored paper that composed itself with some weird drawings. Tsunade ordered sake and started drinking while she went on to read the letter. Dear Tsunade, I'm writing this to you, not as the Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, but as the old man that trained you. I would like to ask you, how are you doing, but I think you would prefer if I just skipped the pleasantries and got to the reason you find yourself reading this. I had a little help from Jiraiya on determining where I could make contact with you, and don't worry, it was really a gamble, as we really don't have a way to know for sure where you would be. I just hoped that you would come to this town due to its gambling businesses and the sake they're famed for. Now, with that out of the way, I wish to inform you that I have a little friend whose last name is Uzumaki. Peefed. From her pink lips came the sputtered alcohol that she had just been drinking. Uzumaki? Then, I can't say who his parents are, since it would be dangerous to write such information here. Well, you may be thinking that this has nothing to do with you, or that, why should you care? Even so, the reason I'm illustrating this is that my little friend came to know about you, and your family's relationship with the Uzumakis. Make no mistake, I did not inform him of this, he just happened to hear it on passing. So, here I'm now to tell you this. He asked if he could see you. He's an orphan, Tsunade, and he's hated. For reasons of secrecy, I can't inform you of why, though I believe you should have come to your own conclusions by all the things that I have mentioned so far. I only made him one promise. That I would deliver his work to you. I think you should know this too. I tried to convince him otherwise, but he's adamant at this. He believes you're all the family he has left. I do not wish to pressure you, Tsunade, but I would like to ask you to think about what you will do. Just a short letter for him would suffice. Just, please, don't ignore him. With respect, Sarutobi Hiruzen, former sensei of Team 7. The blonde kept staring at the letter, reading it and rereading it over and over again. She felt her mouth dry for some reason and her throat parched. The blonde really didn't know what to do. Sure, if her sensei had asked her to come back to Konoha, she would have just burned the damn thing and thrown it into the trash. If it was some kind of mission or asking her to do some work in the medical field, she would spit on his face. But that's not what he asked. Hell, it wasn't even him who asked something of her. It was a little boy that, even if she wanted to fool herself, she had to admit, was the only family she had left. And it was probably the same for him. She put the letter down and looked around the table, trying to find the so-called work that the boy sent her. Her eyes finally landed on the piece of paper that Shizune had between her hands. The black-haired Kunoichi was eyeing with furrowed brows, turning it from one angle to the other, obviously trying to understand what it contained. Tsunade stretched her hand towards her and cleared her throat to get her apprentice's attention. Shizune's eyes snapped at her master, and seeing the "give me" motion that the blonde was giving her with her hand, the brunette relented the colored paper. So ugly was Tsunade's opinion on the drawings. Painted with crayons, some random pudgy figure that seemed more like a balloon filled with orange color. Yellow tips in what she assumed was its head and big blue circles in where she thought was the face. At its side, a bigger figure, or more like a malformed cow shape. Yellow lines came cascading from the sides of the head. Ugly skin-colored Crayola adorned a little part of the character, and she could see small bits of green under yellow blemishes that tainted most of the picture. I guess Sensei told him how I look. On the edge of the picture, in what she could tell was the old man's handwriting, expelled a few words. Uzumaki Naruto, 5 inches. So he's just a shrimp. Her impassive look didn't remain for even an instant, as a soft smile made home in her lips. "Lady Tsunade?" Shizune asked curiously. It was not often that she saw such a warm smile on her master's face. Hell, if she thinks about it, she hadn't seen that smile of hers in years. Tsunade closed her eyes, took a deep breath, exhaled and sat still for long minutes. Finally she said, "We are going to Konoha," stood up and walking away. "Yes," came Shizune's answer, until she processed what just came out of her lady's mouth. "What?" And she went into panic, scrambling her pig along the way. A blonde, a brunette and a pig walk out of a bar. The streets of Konoha were just as she remembered them. Washed in the moonlight, there was just this air of mystery surrounding the village hidden in the leaves. Her steps echoed in the noisily occupied city. Shizune was not far behind with Tantan in her arms. When Tsunade first arrived, the ninjas positioned in the gates were insistent in informing the Hokage of her arrival. Yet she gave them a deadpan stare, and subtlety told them that the Anbu were no so useless as to having to rely on 2 random gatekeepers, no offense. Of course, she used a combination of not-so-filtered words and had a snarl on her lips. Izumo and Katetsu would never be the same. "Tsunade-sama, what are we doing here?" Shizune's pleadings were answered with a "huh," as the blonde kept putting a foot in front of the other without breaking her pace, and the girl could only sigh. Her master had suddenly stood up and announced their return to Konoha after reading a letter, and had said no word about it to her student afterward. The girl was between glad, relieved and aghast, confused. She would follow the woman nonetheless. Few passerbys spared the duo a look, whispering away between themselves. "Tsunadeheim is back. Tsunade-sama. Lady Tsunade." She gave them not a single look or even spared a glance. She advanced forward with big strides and a single purpose in mind. If the old man lied just to get me to come, she knew her sensei wouldn't do that, but the darker part of her was insecure, conspiring with her fears and yelling at her to run away again. However, she would not let it be. If there really was a lonely little boy waiting for her, if he was her family. "What is that?" Her apprentice's voice shakes her out of her thoughts. Looking back at the black-haired girl, she notices that her eyes were pointing to somewhere else, so she followed her line of sight. "Get out of here, you demon." A blonde boy is thrown out of a store. He could not be older than 5, and by how thin and dirty he is, he's probably been living in the street. This sight does not bode well for Tsunade. She, more than anyone, knows what her grandparent dreams were when he founded the village. For the children to not grow up in fear of dying, for them to not go through hunger or pain. It was because of this that Konoha's policy when it came to children was so strict, and why there were numerous orphanages. It was weird, odd even, to see a child in these conditions inside the walls that her grandfather erected. What was disturbing her further was the looks that the villagers that surrounded the scene were giving the kid. "Wah, a stone," they fucking threw a stone at him. Slight crimson liquid ran the child's temple, running down his cheeks and curbing down his small chin. Salty tears formed and his lower lip began to tremble, his pupils shaky in fear in front of the mass of adults that were surrounding him. He curled into a ball, expecting the worst. She broke. "What is going on here?" Her voice was calm, but a thread of violence was passed through her tone. The villagers froze at the feel of the sudden killing intent. Marching on, like a sea being splitted, the people made way for the princess of Konohagakure. Their pupils became dots at seeing her figure while Tsunade strided to the kid. Shizune confused steps following behind as the girl didn't understand how the village that she loved so deeply could do something like that to such a small kid. Tsunade came to a stop in front of the little blonde. His cerulean eyes looked at her, fear stretched and his muscle tensed. So the Sannin retrained her glare, gave him a soft smile and kneeled, finally meeting him in the same eye level. "And who might you be, little one?" The child stopped breathing for a brief second, then launched at her, landing in her bosom and latching to her as if she were life itself. His cries were deafening, so she hugged him tighter in response. It was 2 weeks after his Gigi visited Naruto that he found himself being kicked out of the orphanage. "Not like I need them," his immature mind uttered childishly, but he learned his lesson after a day of not getting anything to eat and sleeping in a cold park. October had come and with it, the temperature dropped heavily at night. The situation pushing him to the limits and a stomach complaining about not getting anything inside made him look through the trash for anything edible. He found none. Putrid fruits and half-eaten smelly food. He came to accept them for the moment as he set his new objective. "I have to get to the Hokage Tower." He knew which building it was, the tall red one, right in the middle of the village. He arrived 2 days later and was scared away by the guards. "Get out of here, you demon. The Hokage will not see the likes of you." And then he was at a loss, not knowing what to do. He focused on surviving. Trash bins and benches became the regular. He tried to ask for help with a few store owners, but a broom swing was the usual answer. He was used to being hungry, but he never ate so little. He survived, though, if only for a reason. She will come. He had an utter and irrevocable faith that his family would come. Tsunade, he remembered her name, like sweet honey to the thirsty, he drank it. He could picture her, right in front of him, telling him that everything would be alright, that she would stay and love him. That they would be family. And that was usually the part of the dream where he wakes up. A ragged, dirty shirt and a dusty short couldn't protect him from the cold, and he knew he smelled. That only contributed to the bit of leaving him alone. The morning carried a shivering draft and the hard wooden bench was felt on his back. The sun was hidden behind gray clouds. It's tomorrow. He didn't know much about himself, but his Gigi told him the date of his birthday. For some reason the town was filled with decorations and merchants prepared their stands. He realized this because he was being kicked more often in the past few days. He was smart enough to be aware that they were not celebrating him. He had no dream of such a thing, not after how they have been despising him. He walked on, bin to bin, looking for lunch. His feet hurt, becoming sensitive, and his stomach lurched every time he smelled something weird and chewed food that just felt wrong. Ba-chan? His eyes were glazed and his mind drifted off to the subject that was his comfort as of late. She was his Ba-chan, as far as he was concerned. He knew that she would come and spook all the mean people away. She would hug him and he would never let go. His stomach grumbled again and he noticed that the night had arrived. He hadn't eaten in all day, yesterday either. A sickly thought made way as he spoke under his breath. Am I gonna die? His legs became weak and his knees wobbled. Uncertainty settled, making root with intrusive thoughts being shot in the dark recesses of his mind. He shook his head and his eyes burned in determination. I will not die here, not now that she's coming. A dark laughter he heard in the back of his mind, as if mocking him, yet he ignored it. I will not cry, he promised. Not when Ba-chan is coming. He would hold it all in until he met her. By the time he made his decision, hours had passed and it was almost midnight. His stomach was still empty. The smell of meat passed through the air and he whiffed it fervently. Looking for the source, he found a mid-sized bar. Before he realized, his feet moved forward, and sooner than he could process what he was doing, his naked foot made contact with the granite cold floor. Air became still and the glares and yells started. He didn't understand what was going on, only that a kick was made and that it came in contact with his tiny chest. Propelled out of the store, he became surrounded by a crowd. Scared out of his mind, tears started to come when a stone was thrown and hit the side of his face. He curled into himself, afraid to die, scared to see their looks, petrified out of pain. He prayed for his Ba-chan to come, to take him away, to rescue him, to scare the bullies and to make his pain go away. He prayed with his eyes shut, lips trembling and crying silently. He begged for his Ba-chan to come. What is going on here? The menacing voice of a female had the odd effect of soothing his beating heart. Like a warm embrace, an aura surrounded him the next instant. While the others could only feel killing intent, he felt safe. With all the courage he could muster, he raised his head slightly. What came into view was the most beautiful person he has ever laid his eyes upon. Blonde, tall woman, long hair collected into 2 pigtails and a green haori perched on her shoulders. Her pale skin made contrast with her honeyed eyes, and he forgot how to breathe. And who might you be, little one? His brain came to a stop. All the world forgotten as he was mesmerized by her. Ba-chan? He dared to hope, to believe that it was her. That he had not died, or that this was some kind of hallucination. He would not risk it, for her to go away, to go too far from his grasp, so he jumped at her, latched with every ounce of strength his famished body could muster. And he cried all he didn't and couldn't cry before. He heard her beyond the fog, but no matter what she said, her voice was a lullaby to him. He went to sleep, finally warm after being cold for so long. Oi, brat. Tsunade tries to pry the young blonde off of her, but she couldn't do it without hurting him. His grip tightened even when she realized he became unconscious moments ago. Without north nor direction, she's at a loss on what to do, but as soon as she begins to think about the situation, the voices and whispers surround her. That's the demon's child. What is he doing touching Tsunade? She will probably kill him. Yeah, that would be for the best. A grinding sound bounces in her head as her teeth grate each other. What the hell are they saying? She had enough. Leave. Killer intent floods the area, but no one moves, afraid of awakening her newly found ire. That only gets on her nerves even more. She stands with an impassive look, and without further ado, she stomps the ground. I said leave. A crater webs through the floor and the stage of her anger cracks like broken glass. Soil dredges around, covering all the view, and the noise of her act deafens everything around. By the time the dust settles, only her, Shizune, Taunton and the little blonde remain. Lady Tsunade, what are we going to do? The blonde didn't have an answer to that. She refused to leave the child alone out of fear of what the villager might do to him, but she had business with her sensei. Tsunade was pretty sure that he was already waiting for her, probably grumpy for being awakened by his anbu in the middle of the night. She huffed at her predicament. Hold him. Tsunade passes the kid to her apprentices unceremoniously, and only now she becomes completely aware of the trail of blood running down his cheek. She pales at the crimson sight. Shizune acts quickly at the frightening look of her master and hastily turns her body around with the blonde child, as to block him. Shisho, I will heal him for a while? Tsunade could only nod numbly at her. Shizune sighs. Why don't you think about what you want to do next in the meantime? The buxom blonde stands still for a few minutes while Shizune scampers to an unoccupied bank in the corner. Panic recedes a little after a few deep breaths, and she sends an apologetic look to the unaware brunette, who was too occupied fuzzing over the little blonde for the moment. Hiruzen was grumpy, and being almost midnight, he was too tired to deny it. It was good news though, so he couldn't complain. He really didn't expect for her student to arrive just 2 weeks after sending the letter. Considering the time it would take for the letter to arrive and how long it takes to arrive at the village from the town he had sent it, it would mean that Tsunade had received it and immediately parted to Konoha. The thought of it put a smile on his face. However, it diminished when he remembered the latest reason for his hardships. Naruto's disappearance. According to the matron in charge, his little friend escaped in the middle of the night without warning or telling anyone. He didn't believe her for even a moment. His suspicions were proven right after Inoichi was done with the petulant woman. A scan in her memories had let them know that that scum of a person had kicked him out without any reason, not even allowing him to procure his belonging. The old Hokage would be lying if he said he wasn't disappointed in his citizens. And it hurt his faith to acknowledge that he couldn't even trust his shinobis, especially after interrogating the guards of the Hokage tower that shooed little Naruto away when he came seeking for help. Worst of all, his advisors were demonstrating how little they cared about him occupying the few shinobis he had at hand and not letting him do a full-on search on the village for him. This had Danzo's smell all over it. He just couldn't prove it. He massages the bridge of his nose, trying really hard to come up with an explanation to Tsunade. Knowing how volatile she was, the moment he stuttered will be the moment he would be flying out of the window. He was not looking forward to it. A door flies over his head. Sarutobi blinks. The noise and boom sound were enough to put the Anbu on the edge. That is, until they looked beyond the frame where the door used to be and acknowledged that it was Tsunade, who the Hokage had been waiting for, the origin of this mess, and they were not paid to deal with such an event. It said so in the rule book of Anbu. If Tsunade was involved, they were excused. So they abandoned their leader, and Hiruzen cursed the fact that he approved that rule in hopes of having more people joining Anbu after the hot spring incident. Tsunade, how have you cut the shit, sensei? The old man swallowed thickly. A droplet of sweat falling down on his forehead. Well, direct to the point I see. Where is he? The Hokage's mind worked a mile per second, directing his eyes everywhere, trying to find a way to inform her of the situation without losing his head in the process. It is like this that his eyes looked beyond Tsunade, exactly to where her apprentice Shizune was. A blonde little child in her arms. Relieved flooded him, and the words came without him taking a good look at Naruto's state. Later, he realized that this was a grave mistake. Well, your student has him in her arms right now, he said with a fatherly smile, hoping that such news would calm the wild blonde and prevent her rage. It did not. What? The air cooled to the point that it was hard to breathe. Killing intent was felt around the village. Her eyelids opened with unconceivable madness. Eyes showed a lack of light, and a cold violent resentment were harbored in the depths of those honey-colored circles. Hiruzen grasped the notion that he did something wrong much too late. But it seemed that the universe still wanted him to live, because as soon as focusing her chakra on her fist, the young child stirred. All the denseness and thick, violent chakra dissolved in an instant, and Sarutobi felt like he lost 10 years of his life when he sighed. Blue eyes came to life as he tussled around in the young Kunoichi's arms. A confused expression adorned his face, making him look more vulnerable than the blonde would ever allow himself to be. Where am I? Who are you? His trembling voice wasn't a good signal, and it became obvious that the kid was frightening. It meant that he had experience with strangers. Bad experience. Naruto-kun, Hiruzen spoke with a soft tone, trying hard for his voice to reach the child, so he knew that he wasn't among strangers. Gigi? It worked. He sighed as he saw Naruto's body lose its tenseness. Shizune-chan, if you could. An unspoken message for her to let him down so the child could get his bearings went along. She did so with a reluctant frown. Naruto, now on his own 2 feet, although with wobbly legs, looked around. The sight of his Gigi took a weight out off his shoulders, and the little blonde could finally smile genuinely after so long. He wanted to run and jump at him, to feel safe again, to feel like his world wasn't crumbling. He was about to do just that when a blonde-haired woman came into his vision, and he went stiff. He dreamed about her for so long, making a whole of the bits and pieces that his Gigi had told him about her. He would dream that her hair cascaded to the end of the world, that her eyes were pools that would drown you in them, that her bad temperament was harsh and her scolds would make you smile by how warm they felt. He would dream about her being there for him, looking at him, staying with him. For the little blonde, all those dreams couldn't come close to reality, to the overwhelming hope and fear that took hold of his heart the moment he laid his eyes upon her person. He blushed at how pretty she was. Her eyes lacked the warmth he imagined, however they held a certain caring that he had never seen in anyone else when they looked at him. He was afraid that she would hate him, that he would screw up, that as soon as she met him, she would up and leave. But all those feelings and emotions went in the deep recesses of his mind as an overwhelming fear of her running away if he didn't do something took control of him. So he jumped at her leg and held her for dear life. Ba-chan. He cried, and forgotten were the girl that was carrying him just a moment ago and his Gigi that looked upon the scene with a relieved smile. Tsunade emotionally stumbles in between the cries of the child that just wouldn't let go of her leg and her instinct telling her to hug him. She takes a deep breath to calm herself and tries to analyze the situation objectively. Even so, her heart was crying for her to just erase the village from the face of the earth, just to protect the little brat. She had a hard time reining her emotions. Sensei. Tsunade really tried to not sound threatening. She failed miserably by how the old man flinched. Her hand unconsciously went to the mess of blonde hair attached to her legs, patting him gently. She cursed when she realized what she was doing, but for the life of her, she couldn't stop herself. Yes, Tsunade? Explain. Now. And now the old geezer is sweating. The blonde couldn't help it, really. There was something yelling at her core to protect the shrimp that made her turn her voice into a growl. She was mad and she didn't know why or how to vent it. Oh, of course. His black pupils traveled to the sides, trying to buy time, but after a few seconds he gave up. Sighing, he told her what he knew, from Naruto's disappearance, who started it, his investigations, betrayal of a few of his shinobis and the actions of the civilian population. He finished by diverting a little of the beating he would surely receive. He told her about his suspicions, about Danzo, about his advisors. With a little bit of luck, she kills them while she only puts me in the hospital. He prayed to the log much to his shame. Small miracles, Hiruzen, small miracles. To say that Tsunade was beyond pissed was an understatement. That's what happened as far as I'm aware of. If you want more answers, you should ask Naruto-kun himself. And that was the crux of the problem. Even though she had her hands on his head, Tsunade had done nothing to acknowledge the mop of blonde hair hanging in her leg. So, with a rather forced and slow motion, she turned to look at the child. Her eyes immediately averted his form. I feel like if I look at him, there will be no turning back. She took a deep breath. I came ready for this, no running away anymore. And thus, she kneeled. The movement had caught him by surprise and had him separated from her. He tried to make himself small, but the blonde took a hold of his shoulder and cupped his cheek with her other hand. Ever so gently, she directed his face to her. Blue eyes met honey. Naruto-kun? Her voice was like silk and softened any defense he had built up over the 2 weeks he had lived on the streets. Could you tell me what happened? His bottom lips trembled and he nodded while looking at the floor. They. In between sobs his story was told. Benches and trash cans, funny-tasting food, the cold and the hateful glares he received. But, I knew Ba-chan would come. And he repeated this phrase over and over again during the whole tale. The only thing that kept him going was the hope of his, Ba-chan, coming to get him, saving him and scaring away all the bullies. Tsunade had the tact to not lash out during the telling. To the village for doing something so undue to a child. To her sensei, for being so careless. And to the kid, for having so much faith in her. It's okay, it's okay. She ended up with a blonde kid crying in her bosom. Shizune looked at the scene with a gentle smile while Hiruzen turned his chair, looked at the window and laid his eyes on the village. Contrasting feelings embedded in his mind. He admitted, the village he thought he knew and the village he had in front of him were completely different. But his will was his own, and he would see through that this became a village that his predecessors could be proud of. For now, we have to think about what we will do. He cut through the awkward atmosphere with ease and a pensive expression. For now, the old man turned to his student and asked an unspoken question with his eyes. What will you do with him? For now, the Sannin really didn't have an answer, but she could make short-term decisions at the moment. Naruto-kun, do you want to come with me? The blonde child raised his head and looked at the woman in front of him while his face pressed in between breasts. The thought of letting go of her not ever crossed his mind as he nodded submissively. She sighed and stood up, kid in arms. She turned to the Hokage. Her cold eyes made presence and made his skin crawl. Sensei, she said in a relaxed yet firm tone. Prepare a meeting tomorrow, have all clan heads and your advisors present. Sarutobi sighed, already resigned to his fate. Of course, he granted, but looked at her from the corner of his eyes, procuring his words before asking. What for, if I may ask? She gave him a smirk that looked more like a bloodthirsty hound. Some heads will have to roll, you know. Hiruzen looked at her, wide eyes, but before he could comment she interrupted him. Nobody does this to my family and gets away with it. He swallowed his fears slowly. I'm glad I told her about my suspicions, otherwise my head would probably be rolling tomorrow too. Unbeknown to them, little Naruto's fists gripped her Haori even harder at hearing that she considered him family too. Shizune, the black-haired girl, perked up at being called by her master. We're going to the Senju compound. Look for something to eat while we're going. Of course, Lady Tsunade. She answered quickly and with no hesitation. Tsunade smiled at her and without even saying goodbye, she left the office. Shizune bowed respectfully to the old Hokage and the man just waved dismissively at her actions. She left just after. Sarutobi leaned, getting further and trying to be absorbed by his seat. His shoulders tense and neck stiff, he could even feel how his stomach was dancing in anxiety. I just hope that the hospital will have free beds tomorrow. He could feel an ulcer forming. To that, he was used to. Hemorrhoids, on the other hand. It will be a long day tomorrow, he thought while standing up and going to the bathroom. She opened her eyes at the first sign of daylight. Tsunade blinked a few times, trying to recompose herself in the few seconds of foggy consciousness that came with a wave of weariness. Taxing her muscles, she went to sit up, yet felt a weight on top of her. Not a heavy one, but one she was not used to. The blonde looked down to her chests only to find a mop of sunshine hair. A small kid was dormant on top of her, hugging her over her shoulders and resting his head on the crook of her neck. What the hell is going on? She was pretty sure she hadn't fallen down so bad to be doing that with a kid. He was cute though. Then the events of the prior day came rushing to her mind. Her arrival to Konoha, meeting the kid, her sensei, and the lost battle in separating the squirt from her. Log almighty, she had to bathe with him because he just wouldn't let her go. So skinny, so small. Once she got rid of the coat of grim and layers upon layers of dirt, she finally got to set her eyes on her last living relative, the last of her family. Tanned skin, sparklingly blue eyes accompanied by whiskers on his cheeks. Blonde hair that had a shine of its own. Just seeing his face and other characteristics that composed his person, she knew who his parents were. Gosh, Kushina, if you saw him. She just knew that the fiery red-haired would just fall for her son instantly, and would murder the whole village for what they had done to him. But now that responsibility had just fallen on her lap. She had no idea of what to do next. Tsunade was just following the motions at this point and was letting her heart guide her. When Shizune finally arrived at the Senju compound with the food she asked for, the brunette came to the odd scene of her sensei sitting on the couch, a little blonde boy sitting on her lap hugging her neck while Tsunade was patting his head with an absent look in her eyes. The apprentice could only chuckle in amusement while clearing her throat to cover the feeling. Tsunade shook her head and looked at her, raising an eyebrow to show that she was less than happy with their current circumstances. What followed was a quiet dinner, and the blonde was not impressed that the chibi chose to sit on her lap. She sighed and had to hand-feed him after realizing that he was making a mess of his food, obviously not knowing how to use chopsticks and even going as far as to try to pick the food with his fingers. Her temperament got the better of her and reprimanded the kid, glared even while telling him to not eat like an animal. Who the hell taught you to eat like that? Aye, hand me those. With a jank, she took the wooden sticks, collected the rice and put it in front of him. He blinked a few times. Do I need to open your mouth for you too, brat? She mumbled in between her teeth with her brows furrowed. Numb, the little blonde opened his mouth, and even though her eyes and voice were aggressive, her motions were delicate and gentle. The rice was put in his tongue and he chewed slowly even though his stomach was screaming for him to just jump at the food, get as much inside him and as fast as he could. But was hypnotized by her warmth and didn't find it in him to move an inch away from her. It took too long, in Tsunade's opinion, for the little guy to finally eat enough to not feel like he was starving to death. Sadly, she had to live with his sad visage as he looked unsatisfied, but she knew better and that he shouldn't push his stomach so much after a long time of not eating anything. So she endured the look of those puppy eyes with an unreadable expression, though her eyebrows twitched when she caught sight of Shizune's shadow of a smile. She went to bed after, and it didn't take a genius to realize that the brat was following her footsteps not far behind. She wasn't surprised when she felt him quietly squirming inside her bed sheets without a mutter or a word and getting comfortable on top of her belly, hugging her body. She didn't say anything either. Damn, it's like having a puppy. Breakfast was much the same. The little bundle of energy was snuggling away between her breasts as she fed him. Shizune tried, keyword, tried, to keep her laughs to herself. Tsunade was practically spasming at this point from the sheer audacity the brat had in doing what he was doing without an ounce of shame. Tsunade attempted to stop what she was doing, but as if sensing her discomfort, the kid just looked at her with those big blue puppy eyes that just made her feel all kinds of wrong just from thinking of doing something that would make him feel not wanted. She realized that that was why she kept to herself and why she didn't reprimand him for any of this. She knew the squirt was crazy, on his own way, about her. And she knew that from his perspective, she was all he had in the world. She hated her sensei for pushing the kid so far, she hated the village for treating the last of her family like a pest, and she couldn't find it in herself to push him away. And he probably can't find it in himself to part from me. Quite the conundrum. Figures that after straying far and away from her home, it was this brat not wanted by its residents that made her come back. She sighed, not really knowing what to do, but for now, let's make some headroll. Hiruzen, what's the meaning of this? The Sandaime sighed. All your questions will be answered in due time. Hokage-sama, with all due respect, you summoned us out of the blue. I think we have the right to know at least the reason as to why we were summoned. The old man nodded, seeing a little bit of reason in the Nara's family head argument. Well, I guess I can part with at least that. He looked around. At his sides were his advisors, Mitokado Homura, Utatane Kaharu and Shimura Danzo, around the table, all the respective heads of the families that composed Konoha. Akamichi, Uchiha, Nara, Yamanaka, etc. They all perked up at his word, apparently waiting for him to relent some information at last. Tsunade was the one that summoned this meeting. They all had different reactions, some surprised, others smiled, a few men blushed. Shame on you. And Sume from the Inuzuka clan was the loudest. Oh yes. Finally something good's happening. It was no secret that Sume, and practically most of the Inuzuka clan, were fans of Tsunade's mythical bad temperament. Something about overbearing women just hit the right spot for them. Though usually he would agree with the statement of Tsunade being in the village as something good, they could not be further from the truth. He felt shivers at just thinking about the rough wake-up call that these people would soon get. Tsunade didn't make herself wait. She was in front of the door that led directly to the council meeting and she was rummaging her brains for answers. She didn't come here with a plan, she only had her fists, her wits, her student, a little blonde kid that just wouldn't let go of her leg and a pig. Not much to work with. She took a deep breath and grounded her mind. Calm yourself, she repeated her mantra. She needed to, because she was shaking with fury at the moment. Yesterday she was mad at what the village had done to her family. Now, on the other hand, after spending time with the kid, after the blonde had whizzled his way into sleeping with her, get your mind out of the gutter, and confirming with her eyes whose child he actually was. Yeah, she was foaming. Shizune, she called in a calm manner. Her student recognized that tone perfectly, so she understood what she was asking. With the expression of a saint she kneeled to the kid that was hugging her sensei's leg with all his strength and spoke softly. Naruto-kun? The kid took his face out of the blonde's calf and looked at the brunette from the side of his eyes. Shizune smiled at his cute demeanor. Tsunade-sama will have a serious and boring talk with the adults. Why don't we wait for her outside? She extended her hand, waiting for him to take it. He didn't. Ba-chan? He looked with those puppy eyes, shining blues that made Tsunade's thoughts swim from side to side. He was asking, pleading for her to let him go with her. For the life of her, Tsunade had the words of, yes, and, just stay with me, at her throat and just about to spill them without thinking. But then remembered why she was there, and that it wouldn't be pretty. So she shook her head at him, and his eyes became moist-wind. Internally, she panicked, screams and yells of confused emotions swirled around her brain. In the outside thought, she flinched a bit and hesitantly, even slowly, raised a hand and put it in his head. Soft. His hair was spiky yet soft, like a just-bought plushie, and she really thought that comparing him to a puppy wasn't all that wrong. He blushed at the contact while she drank his shyness. Without thinking, she kneeled to his eyes level and put her hands on his shoulders while looking directly at him. She addressed him for the second time since meeting him. Naruto-kun. She thought about her words and knew that she wasn't any good in subtleties, so she told him like it is. I'ma go in there, yell at a lot of people, probably punch someone and hurt others really badly. Yeah, that wide eyes expression is the right reaction. After that, there's going to be lots of blood and broken bones, and I'm going to heal whoever I feel like. She averted her pupils to the side. Nice going Tsunade, you scared him. She tilted her head and thought about how to make him comfortable again. We can go eat whatever you want after that, okay? She said softly, ending it with a sweet smile. There's no need to say, he just nodded numbly. His blue eyes conveyed emotions between scared, confused and awed. Shizune shook her head with a smile while massaging the bridge of her nose. Tsunade gave them both a confident smirk, congratulating herself for her careful choice of words. She stood up. Go with Shizune for now, I will go with you after I'm done. And patted his head for good measure. Seeing his lack of response, she nodded, self-assured now, though The blonde gave Shizune a glance that conveyed all her orders and her apprentice complied. Though Tsunade decided to ignore the pang of jealousy that arose when the brunette cupped the little boy in her arms. She turned again to the door and closed her eyes. Now mind clear and feeling her heart in the right place, she smiled. And she kicked the door open, which flew from its hinges. Just like the day before, she saw how not only her sensei paled in her presence and killing intent. She felt happy for some reason. The air was dry and a fly went by. No one dared to speak a word as a wooden door went through above them. The heads of the most powerful shinobi families felt their throat clog while the village elders went wide-eyed as the wooden piece finally made contact with a wall and its crashing echo across the occupied room. "Hello everyone. It's been a while," the blonde medic says with a sweet smile across her lips. Behind her a brunette was trying to drag a pig and an astounded and reluctant child away from the argument that would soon happen. "Let's talk." She cut through the silence with a clap of her hand. Even though Tsunade had encouraged it, no one dared to move their mouth or make a sound. Well, except the Hokage, who sighed and was internally complaining about how much it would cost to repair all this damage. He felt brave nonetheless and eager to end this. To the misstep you must hurry. Or better said, the earlier they got injured, the earlier they would heal. "Would you like to take a seat, Tsunade-chan?" He risked, prepared to dodge any punch thrown at him. The Sanin arched one brow to her hairline in amusement as she saw the tensed muscles of her sensei. She relented, though, just nodding along. She could hold herself from bashing some heads, for the moment. She walked silently while her high heels made echo accompanying an unashamed tack sound reverberating around and sat nonchalantly with her arms crossed in the seat of the Senju's clan head. Looking over them, she set her eyes on each of the members present, making sure her glare went noticeable as they rested for a while in each of the elders. The message was clear to everyone present: she was out for blood. "If you will, Tsunade?" She turned to Sarutobi with an unreadable expression set on her face. "I've made it clear that it was you who summoned this meeting." The medic nodded a few times, took a deep breath with eyes closed while thinking of her words. She opened them slightly and her eyes rested on the tiny figure just beyond the frame where the door used to be. Her eyes met his and he waved his little hands at her timidly. She couldn't keep the smile that crept in the line of her lips. She mouthed a silent, "Go," and he gave her a little smile. That's when Shizune finally scooped him and rested his head on her shoulder before turning around and walking away with Taunton not far behind. The whole time he didn't take his huge blue eyes from her. Tsunade felt her chest compress and he disappeared in a corner, though, the worst part was, for some reason she wanted to punch Shizune? Now that made no sense to her. "I better finish up quickly. The brat will probably start crying in the next minute if he doesn't see me soon." She nodded to herself. Yeah, it's for him. Someone clears their throat and Tsunade comes back to herself, and she notices the look that people were giving her, specifically the women in the room. What's it with them giving me that knowing look? She felt herself blush slightly at showing such a side in front of these people, so she frowned more to compensate for it. Worst of all was Inuzuka Sume. She had this feral smile and muttered something under her breath whilst shaking her head in good humor. Tsunade could only catch some words such as, "new pup," "damn," and "titties milk smell," whatever that meant. She would not deign a thought to those words. He cleared her throat and glared at the whole room. "It has come to my attention that Konoha has not been treating my family as they should." She raised her nose and crossed her arms under her breasts. "If any of you have any excuses, I would like to hear them now." She waited for them to speak, but not a sound was made. She shakes her head in disappointment. "So, losing your heads it is." She plucked her lips and closed her eyes while supporting her hands on the sides of her chair so she could stand. However, before she completed the motion, a voice interrupted the action. "Excuse me, Tsunade-sama." It was Akamichi Shuza who spoke, obviously uncomfortable by the threat just made. "Could you please explain what you just said?" he added in clear confusion. The blonde medic raised an eyebrow. "What is so confusing about it?" She was about to say so when Sume clarified their situation for everyone. "She's talking about the pup there." Pointing to the entrance with her thumb, her feral grin made her voice even sharper. "He's an Uzumaki. Tsunade-sama's mad, 'cause you dumb dums let the kid suffer in the hands of the idiots out there." She finished indicating at the village that rested just outside of the window with her head. Some eyebrows were shot straight to their hairline, others had their pupils contracted. Kaharu and Hamaru showed a grim expression, demonstrating that they have been out of the line of duty long enough to allow themselves to show this reaction. Hiruzen's eyes bore holes at the table while Danzo's visage remained the same, unchanged. Tsunade gave the Inuzuka's clan head a look. Are you saying that you're not one to blame for what was done to him? She gave a dangerous look to Sume, even making the woman sweat slightly. The wild-haired was quick to defend herself. Actually, I was against all of it. Really, she pleaded desperately. I barked and yelled all along. Heck, I even offered to adopt the pup. Tsunade looked at her sensei, searching for any kind of confirmation, to which the old man only nodded. So the blonde sighed. Well, that's one less head rolling today. She reluctantly accepted. Anyone else has more excuses. As if a force compelled many to act, a wave of raising hands made itself known. The blonde medic gritted her teeth. Fucking hypocrites, she said under her breath. There was a standstill while Tsunade decided what to do with these people. Then she remembered what her sensei told her, and just like that she sent a glare to the elders. What do you have to say for yourself? Both Kaharu and Homura flinched while Danzo sat still as a statue, paramount of his resolve. So, they remained silent? Speak. Her word was final. It was not us that discriminated against him. Tsunade-sama, the cold voice of the shadow of the leaf spoke. The medic decided to entertain him, only because he was the only one to speak. Huh? What is that supposed to mean? Hiruzen didn't like where this was going. He knew that Danzo's best weapon was his silver tongue, but he found no reason to stop him. The Jinchuriki, crack, wood splintered. Serves the village. The warhawk paused when he noticed that Tsunade's chair was lacking one armrest. It looked as if it was crushed with violence. He hesitated for a bit but cleared his thoughts in the next moment. Ahem, the villagers, they somehow made the connection. The information leaked. She corrected in a cold tone. Danzo glared at her, not minding her interruption. Yes, the information leaked. There was nothing we could have done. So we have a traitor. She catches his eye twitch and she bathes in the assurity that such actions reveal. It was him, she has no doubts anymore. This is the most expressive you would ever get him, and you would only manage to do so by calling him a traitor. The blonde came to that conclusion fast. What to do, Tilda? Watch your tongue, Haim. In his tone was a tacit threat. She didn't care, and she would admit it, she was enjoying this a bit too much. But who could blame her? Ho, anyone would say that I just spoke ill of you, Danzo. His eyes sharpened, yet she wouldn't let go of this. Have I? And now it was her turn to glare. The air was still. Sweat trickled down the back of many. All the clan heads thought this would end badly, though if Sume had a tail, it would be wagging. The Inuzuka matriarch just loved this kind of drama. Quote. A dark look crossed the warhawk's face, but it was quickly gone. Tsunade, however, got the message. He's planning something. If you would continue, Haim. He conceded, for the moment. The medic glared for good measure. As I was saying, she gathered herself and stood up, pushing her chair as calmly as possible, as not to raise suspicions. The brat is an Uzumaki. She looked around, confirming that she had everyone's attention. I hope that there's no need to reiterate the blood ties that not only my family has with his, but the connection that I have with him. Some nodded at her words, yet others looked at her in confusion. Mostly the minor clan heads' families. So she sighed. Bunch of ignorant thwarts. Uzumaki and Senju go way back. Her eyes directed at those that were confused moments ago. She started to walk around the table, like a cat circling its prey. Slowly she stalked as she continued her explanation. Not only are we cousins. Some flinched at the notion. But my grandmother, Uzumaki Mito, was the wife of the Shodem Hokage, and now Tilda they're panicking. She had to smile at that. I don't think I need to go on a full story lesson, but during the Second Great War, the Uzumakis were exterminated and went into hiding. She stopped, just behind Hiruzen, getting the whole room to look at her. That happened because we failed to assist them, so she looked at each individual and crossed her arms under her breast, nose slightly tilted upwards. We owe them. Konoha has a debt to their clan that we will never be able to repay. With that, she started to leak killing intent. Anyone would have thought she was about to attack the Hokage, seeing her positioning, yet the lack of reaction of the Sandaime confirmed only one thing. He was fully supporting her actions. Troublesome. Nara Shikaku finally spoke. What do you really wish for, Tsunade? His eyes slithed and posture lazy, yet there was a sharpness to his tone. What's done is done, we don't know who to blame, or what to do, we can't control every villager's actions. He closed his eyes and muttered under his breath, as much as I would like to do that. Though he managed to include the word, troublesome, between each breath. The blonde medic receded her killing intent and took a deep breath. I don't even know what I'm doing. I will take full custody of Uzumaki Naruto. She wasn't asking or requesting, she was announcing. There was silence, and she maintained her ears up to hear whispers. There were none. She was quite satisfied. That was until an old crook spoke. I will say what I said to Hiruzen the day he came to us with the jinch. Words died in his mouth when there was a peak of righteous hostility sent in his way. Naruto, he almost spit at the name. Give him to me. I will make him a loyal weapon to the village. Many expected an outburst, yells or even a body or two, but Tsunade didn't move. She only rolled her eyes to him. Why would I do that? Danzo muscles tensed. Something is wrong, he thought. He's emotional, dependent and needy of outside attention and affection. The hawk tried to relax, the discomforting feeling he was having wasn't going away. Easily manipulatable, swayed, if I do say so myself. There was this thick air of uncomfort in the room, as if an explosive tag was about to blow off. And how would you remedy this? Her high yet tempered voice cut through, but it just managed to increase the tension. I have my methods. Well, if you believe that then, her voice sounded hesitant and Hiruzen faltered. She isn't going to actually agree on this, right? Then there was a creak, only for a window to break just after. Danzo Tilda. She cried, bringing her hands to her cheeks as if panicking. Her tone was a bit too dramatical on her part. Some would swear they heard the word, yeet, in the background, even though none knew what it meant. What the other clearly saw was Tsunade grabbing the old warhawk by the scruff of his neck and throwing him with all her might through the window. The Sandaime could only look in bewilderment as his former teammate became a spot in the sky. No one knew how to react, so Tsunade broke the silence. Did you see? She said while putting a hand over her heart, as if to calm it from beating too fast. To leave like that, so rude. He'll be lucky if Sensei doesn't announce him as a rogue, to leave the village like that. She shakes her head in disappointment. Dumbfounded, no one knew how to react. Did you just? How could he do that, right? Tsunade cut Shikaku off before he could say more. Her glare sent a silent message to everyone in the room. He just left on his own volition. Yeah, that he did. The most important heads in the village nodded, not wanting to leave through the window too, of their own volition. So, the blonde medic clapped her hands together and sat on Danzo's unoccupied seat with a larger-than-life smile on her lips. Let's get some things clear, shall we? She ended with a tilt of her head, as if she was just a young girl trying to look cute. Hiruzen licked his dry lips as he heard her voice. The sound of it seemed to become more distant by the second. He was closing himself to the reality of the situation. A dream, this is all probably a dream. While the current Hokage was convincing himself that this was all a delusion, ANBUs from the Nei or Root Division were confused on what to do, as they followed the same rules the normal ANBUs do. Of course, their rulebook had certain modification, but the thing is, Danzo forgot to remove the rule about being excused from duty when an incident involves Tsunade. And like the emotionless shinobis they were, they followed those rules without blinking. The only ones truly happy about the whole event were two. Tsunade, who was feeling rather satisfied with her most recent action, and Sume, who was having the time of her life. No, Tsunade, that is not the right thing to do. The blonde medic would have pouted, but she was mature enough to realize that she didn't have the age to pout anymore, but the intention was there. After 5 head families were incapacitated, voluntarily relieved for a few weeks were her words, by Tsunade, Sarutobi had to postpone the meeting until everyone were in the right set of mind to continue the meeting. Luckily, after Danzo, none more were thrown out of the window. The Sandaime made a conscious effort to not acknowledge this fact. He would ignore it and pretend that his former teammate was just left of his own volition, less paperwork. Yes, it's because of the paperwork, just that. And right now he was trying to convince Tsunade that a ninja leaving the village without previous notice was not grounds to put his name in the bingo book with a reward for their head. Reward that she was offering to pay out of her own pocket. He knew that Danzo had dirty laundry and the softer side of him wanted to see the Warhawk do amends with his mistakes before he was put into trials. Tsunade was having none of that. Come on, sensei. She slammed her hands on his desk and the paperwork flew across the Hokage office. If you don't want to send Anbu, then you could just capture him if he's sighted. Sarutobi let out a long breath. For the last time, Tsunade-chan, he didn't go rogue. Are you sure? He's not here anymore, and you don't know where he went. She pursed her lips and crossed her arms under her breasts, eyes rolled, trying not to look at him. That's pretty rogue to me. So, he glared at her, accusing the medic silently of playing coy. You're saying that you throwing him out of the window had nothing to do with it? She tilted her head and her eyes shined with innocence. I don't understand what you're saying, sensei. He was about to refute her more sternly when the new door he had installed in the morning slammed open and a yellowish blur slammed into the woman and the Anbu tensed for a bit. Naruto? Her voice cut through the heavy air and the guards relaxed. Ba-chan, he squealed while rubbing his cheek on her pants, as if trying to get scent all over him. Such a weird brat. She wasn't stopping him, though. Lady Tsunade. In came Shizune with sweat trickling down her face and Taunton in her arms. She looked at her master and the Hokage. A sheepish look came over her along with a slight blush of embarrassment. And then finally her eyes settled in the form of the boy that was currently rubbing his face in her teacher's legs. "Ah, I'm so sorry for interrupting," he just got up and left suddenly. She advanced a few steps in and extended her free arm to grab the kid, yet the blonde medic raised her hand with a soft stop in her lips. Shizune stopped in her tracks and looked at her teacher strangely. And Tsunade didn't actually know why she stopped her student. She just felt like Shizune already had enough time with Naruto. In reality, the fact that the boy was hugging her leg just felt nice. She would never admit this, but she understood that she was, maybe, just a little, tiny bit jealous of the time her student had passed with the little ball of sunshine. It's okay, Shizune, I will take care of him, you're probably pretty tired. Shizune just smiled at her teacher, thinking of how uncharacteristically thoughtful and considerate she was being. She was obviously wrong in her assumption, but no one would be able to correct her. No, my lady, I'm fine. I will just take him. She extended her hand again, just about to grab him when Tsunade's palm softly slapped her fingers away and her head shot up to look at the blonde. Tsunade was smiling kindly at the brunette while one hand went to the little boy's head and ruffled it. The boy giggled in kind. Nah, just let him, she said, not an ounce of animosity in her voice. However, Shizune felt threatened for some reason. She nodded and complied, backstepping, although timidly. Hiruzen cleared his throat, bringing attention to his person again. Now that we're all here, there's something I want to discuss. Really? Really? Shizune could say she was impressed. Beyond that, even. They had left the Hokage Tower a few hours ago and were currently walking through the streets of the village. Now, in came the news that made Shizune tremble in excitement. Not only were they staying in the village for the long term, but when she asked her lady where to buy sake from now on, her sensei told her that she would not be drinking for a while. The black-haired girl didn't want to push her luck, nor interrupt the scene that was developing in front of her. Seeing her sensei carrying the boy Naruto, she corrected herself, in her arms, while the kid just melted in her touch. It just seemed oddly right to her. Especially considering that she had never seen such a content expression on her teacher's face since she met her. Not even when her uncle was alive. She didn't know what to make of it. She still didn't understand why the blonde medic decided to stay in Konoha. Tsunade didn't even explain it to the Hokage. She just said that it was her decision and that was it. She even destroyed his desk when he pressed her for reasons. So, Shizune wasn't going to risk her luck. But curiosity killed the cat, and Shizune was a curious girl. Why? It was not only a why to the sake, it was a why to everything. She would follow the woman to the end of hells. She was all she had left, but for the life of her, for the first time in years, she didn't understand anything. Tsunade, for her part, looked over her shoulder and looked at her student, understanding the depths of her question. She sighed and turned slightly, revealing a serene-looking child in her bosom. She hugged him tighter and looked into the dark eyes of her student, and without hesitation, she shrugged. I don't really understand myself, was her message. The brunette sighed in defeat, bringing Taunton closer to her body to amend for her confusion. The pig only oinked at her action. A growl interrupted any further talk. Ah, sorry Tilda, Rather embarrassed, Naruto scratched the back of his head. Not that any would blame him, it was after midday and lunchtime had already passed, yet none of them had eaten anything. The blonde pondered for a second and proceeded to put Naruto gently on the ground. He looked at her curiously for a few seconds until Tsunade spoke again. "Follow your nose, eh?" It was not only the boy who was confused. Shizune arched an eyebrow and Taunton winked in confusion at her actions. "Come on, Naruto." Tsunade smiled gently while patting his head. "Just follow your nose to the place that smells the goodest, we will be right behind you." She grabbed him by the shoulder and turned him around, pushing him slightly as the boy looked over his shoulder with scrunched brows, but shrugged at the end. He raised his little nose and flared it up a couple of times, then started walking at a random direction, for them, without hesitation. "Let's follow," Tsunade said with a weirdly excited expression and started walking with a skip in her step, following Naruto's trail. Shizune stood there for a moment, trying to process what her sensei just did. Taunton winked in jealousy. "Did she just?" She shook her head. "There's no way that's possible." She started walking, following behind her sensei. Sensei doesn't think of him like a dog, definitely not. She almost missed a step. She did have her doubts. Ramen. It was ramen. Tsunade blinked a few times, because if she remembered correctly, this food stand was Kushina's favorite. He really is your son. To think that just based on the smell he would guide them to his mother's most precious place put a smile on her face. "Can we really?" He gave her a puppy's eyes look that just made her stomach flip on its side. She wasn't sure if she could keep her voice leveled, so she only nodded. The blonde boy just ran inside without looking back. She shook her head while Shizune let some giggles escape her lips. "Oh, who do we have here?" As they came in they heard a melodious voice of someone that Tsunade knew pretty well. Tucci was beaming at the kid that was standing on top of the stool without any shame nor reserve on his face. "OG-san, what do you make here?" The stars on Naruto's eyes couldn't shine brighter, and Tucci could only laugh harder. He knew that look, it was the look of someone who was about to experience heaven. It brought back memories of certain red-headed kunoichi. Then his eyebrows reached his hairline. Tsunade knew that look, the recognition, the expression of someone who connected some dots. "Tucci, how are you?" So she interrupted him before he said something. She will have that talk with Naruto, she already threatened her sensei about it. The kid deserved the truth, at least to the amount he would understand at the moment. Starting with who his parents were was the first step. But not right now. Now they had to eat. "Lady Tsunade?" He looked at her and she glared in kind. "Not the moment." He nodded, understanding the message. "Ba-chan, what is this food?" Tsunade turned to the ball of energy and had to hold another smile. It just looked like he was about to have a stroke just by the smell that was coming out of the kitchen. "You mean ramen? Ramen?" The way he said it was just weird, as if it was the name of a long-lost love. It gave her chills. Maybe bringing him here was a mistake? It was a mistake. Tsunade realized this after the 10th bowl, and it seemed as if the kid had space for a dozen more. But she couldn't allow him. She could already picture the stomach ache he would get from eating so much and such a heavy food. So, with a pained heart, she had to draw the line. She avoided looking at his betrayed eyes. Tucci, bless his heart, had just the thing, or the person, to take the blonde's mind out of the ramen he wasn't allowed to eat anymore. It was good, in Tsunade's opinion, that Tucci had a cute daughter that was so socially experienced and extroverted that she could overwhelm the little guy. "Are those whiskers real? Your hair is really soft. Why are you blonde? Are you a Yamanaka? Ah, your cheeks are so puffy." She says and asks all of this while having a rhythm of motions between hugging and poking the kid. The poor brat is so red that you would confuse him with a tomato. Even so, she could tell that the boy was embarrassed, but in no way or form was he reluctant to receive such pampering. "You're so cool, Tilda?" She finally squealed and picked him up in a hug, circling around the store while Naruto seemed to want to bury his face in his hands, though the girl's arms prevented him from doing so. Lastly she stopped and looked at Tucci with pleading eyes. "Can I keep him?" And just like that, Naruto disappeared from her arms. She looked from one side to another, trying to understand what was happening until her eyes finally caught the figure of the person known as the Princess of Konoha, her little sunshine in the arms of the woman. Her pupils contracted and her eyes opened like dinner plates. Lady Tsunade. Quickly she bowed in respect. To think that she was so enthralled by the boy that she completely ignored all the other people present. My deepest apologies. The medic looked at the trembling body of the 10-year-old girl while holding Naruto's confused figure close to her body. Arms coming around his back so he would not escape be taken was stolen. No. Snared by other girls. Yes, he's too innocent, they will take advantage of him. She convinced herself. It didn't take hold in Tsunade's mind that he was only a 5-year-old with no current interest in the farrier. It's okay, she responded emotionlessly. What's your name? She hit her head with her knuckles, reprimanding herself for her carelessness. Nice to meet you. She bowed her head slightly in respect. My name is Ichiraku Ayame. She finished with a dazzling smile. Brown hair and eyes, nice and honest personality, she did not shy away from others. Tsunade would give it to her, she was a good girl, but she couldn't bring herself to let the little girl pamper Naruto. She didn't know why. Nice to meet you too. The medic gave her a false smile that would have fooled anyone that wasn't a ninja. Shizune saw right through her. It doesn't matter. Now, she gave Ayame her kid's version of a glare, but the child didn't even take the hint. Naruto is mine. That came out wrong. She panicked for a bit as everyone watched her with a bewildered look. I mean, I'm his guardian. She started to sweat. So he stays with me. Yeah, good enough. Okay? Ayame tilted her head and looked at her father, who only shrugged in confusion. She turned to Shizune and Tonton, who looked resigned at the scene. She stuttered a bit, not used to people acting so protectively. Can I play with him again? The blonde looked at the girl for a moment, right into those puppy eyes of hers, and looked at the boy in her arms, who looked hopeful at the prospect. She sighed, and she didn't understand why this bothered her so much. Sure, she said between her teeth and reluctantly put the blonde down again, who just hugged her leg one last time and went running to the girl. Tsunade's heart felt heavy, seeing the little boy going away so happy with some random girl. Little did she know that, in the future, Ayame would be the least of her worries when it came to Naruto and the girls he interacted with. Sun rays went through the foliage of a tree that her grandfather had grown a long time ago. The green of the pasture spoke about the natural energy that filled the garden. She still remembers, as a little girl, how her grandma Mito would wake every day at dawn to take care of every single plant that she planted in this garden. And now, decades later, here she was, old enough to have her own grandchildren, tired of life and bitter enough that not even a dango could sweeten her sour heart. Sitting on the wooden floor of the compound, she felt a little ball of sunshine and rainbows squirm in her lap. Giggles escaped his lips as his arms went around her waist, face pressed between her mounts, yet there was none of the pervertedness that you would expect from such an action. Tsunade didn't stop it either. Tsunade-sama. Behind her stood her apprentice, Shizune, pig in hand in case of emergency. Tsunade could tell that her student was beyond confused at their current situation, especially considering the discussion she had with the old geezer in the morning. You can leave if you're not comfortable with this, Shizune. The brunette vehemently shook her head. Even if what she was going to do was beyond her comfort zone, she would not even dream of leaving her master alone. The child in her lap kept rubbing his cheek to her skin without even considering the tense atmosphere that radiated from these two people. He was just too happy to even care about it. Tsunade was kind of sad that she would have to take that smile out of his lips, but this was something that she wanted to do. She had to do. Naruto. Her voice was gentle, a tone that Shizune rarely ever heard, if ever. The child stopped his motions as looked up, directly into her honeyed eyes. We need to talk about something. She started patting his head when he looked unsure. Tsunade wouldn't be able to forgive herself if some hesitation leaked into her voice. She squirmed internally and took a deep breath. Ba-chan? His voice was laced with vulnerability, and the blonde had to squash the impulse to hug the little thing until he stopped breathing. It's nothing bad, she caressed his chubby cheeks. Ever since he came to live with them, his diet has improved. No longer was he a skinny brat that bordered desnutrition. Now what was in front of her was a healthy kid that had so much energy that he could barely keep himself still. But there are things that you should know. He furrowed his brows in worry, and this was the final nail. Letting go of her self-restraint, she gently grabbed the back of his head and pressed his face to her bosom. Her other hand gently rubbing his back, moving rhythmically in circling motions. Whimpering a bit at the rare show of affection, The kid closed his eyes, allowing himself to be drowned by her affection. I'm going to tell you a story that has to do with my family, this village, and... She bit her lips, looking for the right words to express what she wanted without it coming as something cruel. And why people are mean to you. This caught his attention, Tsunade could tell, since his breath hitched and his tiny hands started to tighten their hold on her sides. Why? She raised her head to the sky, as if looking for answers, and being pretty sure that her grandmother would be able to deal with something like this in the blink of an eye, and pressed on. Here goes nothing. It all started more than 60 years ago. And with that, she tells Naruto the story of the village, of her grandfather, of his dreams. About his friendship with an enemy, about the betrayal, and finally, the main issue of the story, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, and how it ended up in the hands of Konoha. It was during their battle that my grandmother saw no other way to free the Kyuubi from Madara's control. She sealed it inside her. But even after that, there was the risk that someone else would be able to do the same thing in the future. So with that in mind, my grandfather hunted all the tailed beasts, so that no one could use their powers to further the destruction they could do. Naruto squirmed on her lap, clearly uncomfortable by the subject. That's not nice, he whispered out. Tsunade tilted her head and smiled at him, encouraging him to continue with a nod. The Bijus, they didn't do anything wrong, it's the mean people that are being stupid. I know. His blue pupils looked at her, but he closed his eyes in happiness when she started to pat his soft hair again. Then what happened? So she told her about how to seek a ceasefire and calm the other villages. Her grandfather gave the Bijus to different villages, asking for peace, even if at the end it was just a temporary measure. She told her about how when her grandmother was getting old, they had to find a new vessel for the Kyuubi, so she asked her family and former village, Uzushiogakure, to send someone young. That someone, Naruto learned, was his mother. You're not happy. It was easy to tell, his body was tense, and he clearly feared that she would not be happy if he didn't like that. It's okay Naruto, it was not fair to her, but that's how it works. It's the duty we signed up for. And your mother? She paused, closing her eyes and remembering Kushina. I will not say that she was happy with it either, but she managed to live a happy life. That got the kid curious, so he looked at Tsunade for more answers. How? Love, Naruto. She hugged him and tightened her hold on his little body. Love. She found happiness with someone, your father, and lived a happy life. Even in the midst of war, she had a smile that outshined the sun. And when she knew she would have you, she was the happiest she had ever been. You gave her that happiness just by existing. The little boy sniffed, melting in her as the blonde kept moving her hand in circles on his back. Without even meaning, she let her head down and kissed the top of his head. She didn't even care about appearance anymore. The medic just focused on giving the kid all the affection she could give. Who was she? Tsunade smiled at his query. Kushina, Uzumaki Kushina. The boy repeated her name, as if tasting the most delicious flavor he had ever experienced. A smile blooming without even a hint of stopping. He averted his eyes, afraid to ask. Do you think she would love me? Tsunade separated his head from her chest and slowly put her forehead against his. She rubbed it against his skin in a caring way, too out of character for her, but it just didn't feel wrong in any manner. She would be over the moon for you, Naruto. He blushed hard, not just for the physical contact, but at the notion of having a mother that would love him so much. What happened to her? Tsunade didn't move. She closed her eyes and relished in the feeling of his warmth being transmitted to her from every point of contact they had. His forehead was soft, squeaky and delicate. His chubby fingers squeezing her green haori and his little weight depositing on her lap. Fragile. That's what he was. She gave him a sad smile. No one knows, on the day of your birth, something went wrong, even though nothing was supposed to go wrong. She gave him time to process the information as she hugged him again, to let him drown in her. The Kyuubi went free, and rampaged the whole village. His breath hitched and the blonde medic decided to press on. I wasn't here anymore, so I only know from what the others said. The Yondaime had to stop it, seal the Kyuubi away again, but Kushina was too weak from birthing you, she would not survive much longer. And only an Uzumaki would be able to hold the Kyuubi within them. Naruto stilled, but that didn't stop her from pressing him harder to her skin. He used me? Yes. That would be the answer that most people would give, but Tsunade no Minato, and she knew Kushina, and more than anything, she knew that her teammate, as much as a pervert that he was, would never have an apprentice with that kind of mentality. So she denied it. No, she said softly and grabbed the boy's face by his cheeks, forcing him to look at her eyes as she spoke. According to what sensei said, I mean, you're Gigi, it's not that he used you, because with the seal that he used, he could easily have killed the Kyuubi, or taken all of the Kyuubi with him. The blonde boy tilted his head in confusion. What? He looked down, trying to understand. Why didn't he do so? Tsunade smiled, and she only repeated the same thing that her sensei told her this morning, when she was discussing, informing him that she would do so, about informing Naruto about his situation. Because he trusted you. He blinked. 'Cause he believed in you. He gasped. He believed in you from the moment you were born, that if anyone would be able to handle, to deal and to endure with all the responsibilities and duties that comes with being a Jinchuriki, the word just tasted bitter in her mouth. It would be you. He remained quiet for a few seconds until he asked, why would he believe in me so much? Because he was your father. The kid gaped for a bit and started to hyperventilate. Tsunade didn't panic, as she knew that this would be part of the process. She just hugged him tight and whispered shushing noises into his ears and waited patiently for him to calm down. What did he want me to do? He asked once his breathing started to normalize. He wanted for you to be you. Naruto tilted his head at that. He believed in you, Naruto. That means that he believed that any choice you would make in your life would be the right one. He took a deep breath, etching those words into his heart, enough to make a scar out of them. And my mom? The sad smile that she had until now turned into a big and honest curve. She wanted for you to be happy. For the rest of the day, Naruto kept himself glued to her, not letting go. She compromised and had to bathe and sleep with the kid. Again, Shizune noted that her master didn't really complain about it. Please, Tsunade-sama. It has been a few days since Tsunade had the talk with Naruto. The kid came out of it better than she was expecting. She will be the first to admit that she's not the best when it comes to sensitive subjects. Some would say she's too blunt, but as she expected, the kid is good with that kind of rashness. You're really annoying. The first day he was all kind of mellow, a tear there, a hug here. Sometimes he needed a kiss in his boo-boo. But by the next day he was running all over the place, whispering about being the son of the Hokage and getting stronger. That was a knuckle in the head that he would never forget. It's funny how affectionate he can be with someone that threatened the life out of him about not telling anyone about his heritage nor the Kyuubi. In hindsight, it was her fault for not clarifying sooner. Not that she would ever admit it. I'm desperate, so, please. Back to the present. It's not every day that you see a Hyuga kneeling and pleading for help. Her heart went out for him, really, it did. But she knows her condition better than anyone. Being near a patient would not end well. Isn't Shizune good enough for you? Next to her was Shizune, feeling rather awkward about the whole thing. My lady. Shizune spoke. I already checked on this patient, and I really don't know what to make of her case. The blonde medic exhaled. She really didn't want to do it, but she will have to deny her help. If she said, yes, here, then there would be no end to it. The next time someone else came they would say, but you helped Hyuga-san, and that would be a whole other headache. Ba-chan? And from behind a little voice came. Tsunade turned. Her pup the brat was scratching his eyes with his tiny fist. Clearly he had just woken up from the commotion. Naruto, why don't you go to sleep again? She said softly, her voice lacking any sharpness that was present just until now. Please, my wife. Tsunade sighed while massaging her temples. And it was such a good morning, I could have been having breakfast with Naruto right now, but no, of course not. Someone had to be dying in such an inconvenient time. She was about to kick the weeping Hyuga when Naruto spoke. Do you need help? Of course the kid would want to help. Arg, why you? The Hyuga finally took notice of the little boy, at first confused, but then his face showed a dawned realization. Manat, keep your mouth in check. Her voice was icy and threatening, she didn't want the wrong ears to heard any of it. Ah, as if realizing what he was about to say, he recomposed and changed the subject quickly. My wife, she's... He looked at Tsunade, as if asking for permission. Naruto beat her to it. She's sick? Yes. Then my ba-chan will help her. He said it so as if it was the most logical thing in the world. Of course, it wasn't. Tsunade was about to tell him so until she caught his puppy eyes, shining with stars and admiration, as if she was the most kind and gentle being in the world. He should know better. She had hit his head multiple times just to get him to sit sometimes, yet here he was, unwavering faith in hand. She sweated and had to admit, she would not be able to win against him. So she sighed and addressed the Hyuga. Give me 2 weeks. She didn't give the Hyuga enough time to process what she just said. She closed the door on his face and went inside, Shizune quickly running behind her, determined to eat something nice and tasty. As a reward for being such a generous person. Never do that again, you hear me, brat? And rather than being scared out of his skin, the kid trotted to her and hugged her side, smiling as he absorbed her warmth. Yes, Ba-chan. She didn't believe him for even 1 second. Shizune just smiled at their interactions. He really knows how to handle her. The brunette thought and didn't know how to feel about it. On one hand, she was happy that the boy was able to get her master to start to work on her problem. On the other, she was rather miffed that she had tried for years to do so. Yet all Naruto had to do was ask Tsunade for it. Well, at least like this Hiyashi-sama's wife will be able to get help from Tsunade-sama. It was a start, she guessed. The sun had risen a few hours ago. Bright lights shone upon the green grass as 3 figures were seen in the backyard of the Senju compound. Come on, Naruto, catch. A blonde woman threw a ball and a blonde boy looked at her actions perplexed with a tilted head. Why'd I feel offended? He questioned himself, but out of reluctance and the glare of the person he called his Ba-chan, he complied. At the side, Shizune shook her head, knowing exactly what thoughts were crossing her lady's mind. She didn't have the heart to nag her master, so she just accepted this at face value. Her teacher treated the boy as a dog, for some reason. Shisho, what do you plan to do now? It had been a few weeks since Danzo had been sent flying. There was a council meeting a week later. It happened once it was generally accepted that Danzo was not coming back anytime soon. There was news of sightings on the border with the grass country, but just that was the Hokage's report on the matter. They had acclimated themselves to Konoha once again. Tsunade opted to work in the hospital, though when they offered her the post of chief physician, she hissed and spatted on their faces, literally. That was embarrassing in its own way. The Gaki is just a little boy, Shizune. Shizune understood what her teacher said. There will be no training until he's older. And she wholly agreed, but that wasn't what she was asking. Pitter-patters were heard and Naruto arrived with the ball in his hand. He inspected it curiously before handing it to Tsunade. He looked at her with his puppy eyes and hesitated to speak. Tsunade seemed to understand that there was something on his mind, so she patted his head. What is it, brat? Something you want to say? She asked. Even though she encouraged him, he still looked reluctant to speak, so she proceeded to kneel and hug him to her bosom. The little kid let himself sink in her skin. That was another change that Shizune noted. Her master had been more physical when it came to Naruto. As soon as the boy looked uncomfortable, she would hug him, sit him on her lap, kiss his cheeks, and she even caught her once. A blush, rubbing his belly. The brunette never once thought that her master would be the kind of person to be so affectionate to another. She was little, so she doesn't remember it well, but she's quite sure that even with her uncle and her little brother, Lady Tsunade was, in her own way, reluctant to show this kind of assertiveness. Not adverse, but it was like with the blonde boy, Tsunade's shyness just disappeared. She had her suspicions, when her master let the boy sleep with her on the first day they met without uttering a word. But in these few weeks the blonde woman's tendency to blush at such actions disappeared. Shizune knew, this boy was probably her teacher's only soft spot at the moment. It was all but confirmed, especially considering that Tsunade said that she would never come back to Konoha as long as she lived, yet, she didn't even hesitate to take that back when it came to Naruto. Can we go play in the park? His soft voice took Shizune out of her thoughts. Ah, yes, that's another problem they had to deal with. Naruto wanted friends, yet, every time he went to the park, trying to play with other kids, most of the children gave their backs to him and left him alone. Even when he was the one to come to them, they just ignored him and would go to play in another place. This broke the little blonde's heart, and Tsunade's killing intent after each occasion was suffocating. Funnily enough, Naruto had no qualms in getting squeezed to death by her, while the rest of the people present had trouble even breathing when they were in the same room as her. It was like her killing intent was just a pat in the head for him. Are you sure? But even the denials of the other kids' attention didn't stop Naruto from trying to befriend them. I only need one friend. If I can get at least one, I will be happy. That's what he would say, but up until now, none of the kids gave him even one chance. Okay, let's go then. Tsunade said while nodding to herself. She stood up with Naruto in her arms. Shizune smiled at seeing the peaceful look on her master. She was happy. It's been years since she saw her master face without a hint of regret tainting her beauty. I will beat the kids that are mean to you, the blonde said with a cheerful smile. Shizune had a grim expression, knowing very well that her teacher wasn't kidding. This is going to be a hard day. Well, that was easy. Cherry Blossom was playing with sunshine. It was the only thing Tsunade could think of. Her pup the brat had tried to get close to a bunch of kids that were playing at being ninjas. They were few, so, obviously, there was room to add Naruto, yet, when he went to them and asked if he could play with them, they all scampered. She even catched a few looking at the blonde with eyes that said, "You ruined our day." This ended with Naruto moping alone, probably not wanting to come back to them at the moment due to being in low spirits. She knew the feeling of just wanting to sit alone and process something without other people around. It hurt her, seeing the brat that hadn't done anything wrong, wondering why the others treated him like that. "Do you want to play with me?" was heard, and it was all that was needed to put a smile on the boy's face. It's reassuring that there are kids who still haven't succumbed to peer pressure. Shizune nodded sagely. Tsunade, on the other hand, was conflicted. Oh, she was happy, really happy for the boy, but apart from that, she was biting her knuckles with a sour expression. Did it have to be a girl? She still didn't understand why this bothered her. But she had experienced these feelings in the past. When Shizune carried him, she wanted to punch her. When Tuchi's girl hugged him, she wanted to blast the ramen place to Kingdom Come. And now another girl made her presence known by being the first to play with the boy. Well, that doesn't matter. She took deep breaths and controlled her movements. Tsunade would rather be burned alive than to be the reason as to why the boy lost that smile of his. So, for the next few hours, those two played together, hand in hand while laughing and having fun under the watchful eyes of the master and disciple duo. Tauntaun stayed at the compound as a guard pig. The girl got a few weird looks from the other kids, but she seemed to not take notice of it and just being immersed in their time together. Tsunade knew when a battle was lost, and she had come to terms with this one thing. Naruto had made his first friend, and it was a girl. Oh? It was Shizune who brought Tsunade out of her musings. The blonde noted that her student was looking in a certain direction. Following her line of sight, she found a couple, no older than 30, looking around, probably searching for their kid. That's when Tsunade noticed the father's hair color. Pink. She blinked twice. So they're probably her parents, the blonde concluded, and she had her suspicions about what was about to happen, but she held firm until the moment she was proven correct. The parents saw their kid playing with a blonde boy and immediately reacted in the worst way possible, in Tsunade's opinion at least. She would not have that. So, with a smile filled with kindness and misdirection, she moved faster than any civilian could react, covering their mouths with her hands. Releasing a bit of killing intent, she made sure they couldn't move. They were frozen and scared, so Tsunade soothed them with a melodic tone. Now Tilda, now, what were you two Tilda about to do? Tilda? She was gentle, of course, as much as one can be gentle while blocking others in a neck restraint can be. Killing intent not mentioned, as it was included in the package. Wah, princess. My Tilda, why don't you wave at the kids for now? Tilda, they look a bit restless. She said in a whisper, and soon enough, both constrained parents could see that the little pink-haired girl was looking at them with a worried frown while the blonde boy waved his hand energetically to their captor, probably beyond happy that he finally managed to make a friend. Before the man, that was the father, could say anything, the pressure in his windpipes increased, so, sweating bullets, he frantically started to smile like a maniac while waving at his daughter, his wife following him not far behind. The response to this action was a disarming smile from the pink brat. Tsunade smiled at her while gritting her teeth. It's for him, she repeated constantly in her mind, as a chant to not weave her. Why are they always girls? She didn't consider herself a jealous woman, much less for her pup brat. For her brat, yes. They're not good enough for him. With that done, she dragged both adults to a dark alleyway with the intent to educate them? Yes, that's the word. The Harunos would never be the same. Are those your parents? Little Sakura couldn't help but feel that his father's smile was a little eerie. Her green eyes traveled to her mother next and noticed that she was waving at her little too enthusiastically. Her sight finally rested on the woman that was next to them. "That's my Ba-chan," her blonde friend spoke. His Ba-chan? In the young girl's opinion, the woman looked too young to be someone's grandma, but her mother would always tell her that one shouldn't ever question a woman's age, so she kept her mouth shut. She's pretty. Breathtakingly so. The pink-haired girl knew that she was on the meek side of things, always finding it hard to make friends, starting to cry when the other kids even looked at her forehead, not to mention that she knew herself a coward. Looking at the blonde woman, the way that she carried herself, that confident smirk, how she lifted her parents over her shoulder, how she threw them over an alleyway and started yelling at them. She was everything Sakura wished she could be. Shivers went down her spine as she looked at the scene, and part of her fear peeked its ugly head, making her want to hide inside her shell. "She's amazing, isn't she?" Looking over at the blonde boy, Sakura could only nod. There were stars in his eyes. Admiration, respect, affection, care, love, multitude of feelings that were overwhelming to her young mind. She understood them too. "What's your name?" she asked. He gave her a blinding smile. "Uzumaki Naruto." "Yours?" "Sakura, Haruno Sakura." While his voice was boisterous, loud and clear, hers was small, barely above a whisper. It was a high contrast. Part of her wished she could talk like that. The other part of her knew that if she were to be so loud she would end up blushing in embarrassment. "Are we friends now?" he asked innocently. She blinked. "What? Ah." He scratched the back of his head, red tint tainting his cheeks. "Well, Tsunade said that." He bit his lips, looking for words. "If I wanted to make friends, I should play with them and introduce myself." Closing his eyes, he pouted while crossing his arms, his legs trashing slightly in the dirt where they sat. "I told her, no, I can't be that easy. But then she kept insisting, and then she gave me ramen. But I was like," and he kept mumbling words that escaped Sakura's mind. She really didn't care, because she already had her answer. "Sure." The blonde sputtered a bit and looked at her in disbelief. Sakura didn't mind. She was happy. She made her first friend and played the whole day. Turning to the directions where her parents were, she couldn't help but feel a little good at seeing her parents cowering like kicked puppies, pressing themselves and trying to hide from the woman that was yelling at them. Her mind blossomed a dream where she was the one yelling at them. Well, not at her parents, maybe at some bully, okay, perhaps at her parents. Her mother had no right to deny her from eating those dumplings. So what if they fell to the floor? The 5 minutes rule was real. Or was it the 5 seconds rule? She shrugged. She ignored the cha that echoed deep in her mind. She wasn't hearing voices. "Nope. Are you sure, my lady?" To Shizune's question, Tsunade only nodded. They had been at it for 3 days already and no major progress had been archived. Though that didn't mean that the blonde medic was about to give up. She was just beyond frustrated. Her hemophobia was something that she never had ever wanted to deal with before, so she actually never thought of it as a problem, except for now. Now, she wished she had dealt with it before. Why? Because her blonde puppy convinced her to treat a patient. A patient that coughs up blood, so yeah, she had to deal with it now. "Do it," she said without hesitation. Nodding solemnly, the raven-haired girl pricked the tip of her index finger. A tiny glob of blood formed. Tsunade went still, pale in snow and eyes glazed over. Shizune sighed, but under orders of her master, she kept the red-tainted liquid in front of her eyes. Therapy by exposure. Nice in theory, but it wasn't working. Just the same as the day before, Tsunade would go still for hours and would not be responsive to anything as long as the blood was in her line of sight. This kept going until one of them had to attend to other responsibilities. Mainly Shizune, going to work at the hospital, or Tsunade being called to consult in more complicated cases. Today it would prove different though, as none of them were ready when a small figure came through the door. Shizune was the first, and only one, to take notice. Just moving her head and smiling slightly at the confused expression of the little blonde boy. "Good morning, Naruto-kun." He answered with a smile of his own. "Morning, Shizune." He was loud, like always. But this did not bother her in the slightest, and she was pretty sure that that loudness was appreciated by her master as well, considering that Tsunade no longer woke up with hangovers since she stopped drinking. His boisterous voice gave liveliness to the up until recently abandoned compound. What's wrong with Ba-chan? His steps were hesitant as he came close to her master, yet Tsunade had yet to react to his presence. Her eyes clouded and there was a slight trembling present all through her. Is she okay? Before she could answer, the boy climbed into the blonde's lap and latched to her body. The medic flinched slightly to the contact, obviously still not registering the presence of the kid yet. Tsunade-sama is scared, Naruto. Shizune explained kindly, her bleeding finger still in front of the clouded honeyed eyes. Scared? She moved her finger a little, making the bead of blood drop to the floor. The little prickle in her finger produced another gout just seconds later. Some things happened, and since then, Tsunade-sama has been scared at the sight of blood. She signaled with her head to her master, causing Naruto to direct his sight to her. As you can see, she can't move nor perceive anything that's going on right now. The little blonde turned to his grandmother figure with a worried frown. Is she in pain? You could say that. He remained there, staring at her as thoughts crossed around his mind. Finally, with a determined glare, he huffed and took her hand. Shizune looked at him curiously, but that didn't deter him, nor did the stiffness of her limb. With a lot of effort, he managed. She reacted with a cringe, her shoulders moving upwards for just a moment. He had put her hand on his head, his two little hands making it do a motion from side to side, ruffling his hair. This continued for a few minutes, none of the occupants of the room making a sound, until the blonde woman raised her other arm. With a slow motion she put it in the back of the child and pressed him against her. Shizune had a smile at that. This was by far the most responsive her master had been since they started these sessions. Not much happened after, but progress was progress. This would be slow, but with the help of her lady's little weakness, in the form of an energetic little blonde, she was sure that in 2 weeks, Tsunade would be ready to see her Hyuga patient. Laughs and giggles filled the walls of the compound. Shizune was pretty sure that, back in the old days, the atmosphere of these grounds were no different than they were now. Children laughing and running, exasperated sighs of the people in charge. An echo of untamed paradise full of hope and wonder. The only discrepancy was probably the orange pig, with motes of cherry pink on its sides, running from the little feets that were chasing it in a bit of fun that the kids called games. Little Sakura had come out of her shell, no longer the shy child that hid behind Naruto when he first introduced her to them. Now her eyes shined in vivacious wonder every time her eyes laid on either the brunette apprentice or the blonde master. Naruto happily joined her in her admiration of them, though he added his own attachment and grew a big head every time while saying, "Yeah, that's my Ba-chan," whilst scratching the bridge of his nose with the back of his forefinger in a proud manner. "What are you two doing to Taunton?" she asked in a mild voice. The little pig looked at her with a betrayed countenance at seeing that the brunette wasn't outraged at the treatment she was receiving. The blonde stopped his chase and his pink-haired companion crashed softly onto his back with an eep. "We're chasing a bush." "A bush?" Shizune looked at the pig, and she could see that the pink motes followed a flowery pattern. Probably the work of Sakura-chan, she assumed, but why is it orange? Naruto said that green bushes were boring. Sakura answered, tints of red painted on her cheeks, yet a playful smile was plastered on her face. "Boring, is it?" the brunette questioned with an raised eyebrow as the blonde scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Tilda. The brows of the apprentice raised to her hairline as she gave a look to the two children, but both of them had the same look on their faces as hers. She looked at Taunton, who just shook her head in response. With that, only one more person was left in the room that could be responsible for that sound. The four of them turned to the corner. There, sitting with her legs crossed, was the only female member of the Sannin, holding a bleeding finger to her face. Tsunade had a pale complexion, still dealing with her trauma, yet her therapy had advanced to the point that others' blood only made her uncomfortable, pretty uncomfortable. So she had moved on to dealing with her own blood. The funny thing is, even though she was pale as snow, there was pink embarrassment reaching her cheeks. Shizune noted that both of her feet were painted pink on the top and orange on the bottom. She was not surprised, it wasn't the first time that both Naruto and Sakura had played with the woman while she was in her catatonic state. Funnily enough, this got her better results than the long hugging sessions that the kids tried a few days ago. Shizune smiled at the memory. Remembering Naruto rubbing his cheeks to her master's right arm while Sakura shyly took to holding the older blonde's sleeve at first, then hiding inside her haori by the end of the day. Lady Tsunade had been grumbling about cheeky brats and their girlfriends for the rest of the day, yet had taken Naruto by the back of his neck and forced him to sleep with her. Something about payback as a bitch, kid. Shizune didn't question it. She was very afraid of the answers she could get about why the little blonde looked so dazed the next day. GRRRRRRRRLLL. And now she was sure it was her lady's stomach that was complaining. Slightly trembling, she pulled down her finger. Let us eat out. Might treat. In the air there was a silent threat that said, don't say a word. That everyone quietly accepted. I want dumplings. Sakura raised her hand, as if she was in a classroom. Lady Tsunade bit her lips while looking at Naruto, who had the biggest smile at the idea of trying something new. So she bitterly conceded to the girl. Fine. Shizune wondered if her lady was really jealous of a little girl. A meeting between two girls can be a magical or a very frightening experience. In Shizune's opinion, it can be both at the same time. Especially when that meeting happens because a boy both of the girls like to pamper introduces them to each other. The brunette sometimes questioned the survival instincts that her little charge possessed. Now we can all be friends. Ichiraku Ayame had a sweet smile, eyes closed and a twitching eyebrow. Sakura politely bowed. Please take care of me. She said those words while not letting go of Naruto's hand, nevertheless her tone was forced. Do they feel like the other will steal the little blonde from them? It was funny how Naruto passed from struggling to make friends to now having two jealous girlfriends. It put a smile on her face. Particularly noting how the little boy was oblivious to all of this, just assuming that it was normal that Sakura wouldn't let go of his hand while Ayame glomped him in a hug from his other side. Shizune could see how the ramen chef's sweat dropped at his daughter's actions, and was about to comment on it when said girl sent him a mirthful glare. He just laughed uncomfortably at this. The apprentice sat beside the pink-haired girl and patted her head affectionately. Green eyes looked at her with a light-hearted happiness. Ayame gave her a toothy smile from above the tussle of blonde hair. Yes, Shizune was sure, these two were actually good friends at first sight. But it's hard, Tilda. I know it's hard, Naruto, but nothing worthwhile is ever easy. He filled his cheek with air and Shizune poked his nose softly. Why do I have to learn this anyway? Because reading is something you will use your whole life, Naruto. Even though he was complaining, Shizune noted that he was doing it just for the sake of it. Words came out of his mouth but his eyes didn't stray from the material that was on the table. Now and then he would mouth some vocals and syllables, forming sounds that had meaning but were alien to him. But you can always read for me. Now you're just being childish. Their banter was the usual. She knew that Naruto hated activities where he had to remain quiet and still. But sadly for him, but not for anyone else, this was something he had to learn to do, otherwise the school or, if he chooses to, the ninja academy will be nightmarish for him. Can I at least sit on Ba-chan's lap? His puppy eyes were a strong tool, and honestly, Shizune hoped that he would always be capable of using it, he was just that cute. Fine, Tilda. With a jolly jump, he happily hopped on the petrified form of her lady. Tsunade was sitting in a corner, her hands now plastered with a good amount of blood, even dripping and tainting the wooden floor. But they were a ninja, medical ninja at that, family, so such a thing was a course for the day. Yes, a family. Shizune had come to terms with it. Her sensei, Naruto and her, they were a family. It didn't matter to her, and she was pretty sure that Tsunade was of the same thought, if they were blood-related or not, or even if they each came together due to different circumstances. They were a family, and Shizune would fight tooth and nail to always be together with them. Oh, I got distracted. In the time she lost sight of him, a bulge had formed on her master's haori, just to the side of her waist. Her lady's only reaction was a tick in her left brow. His giggles reached her ears and the brunette could only sigh. Come on, Naruto, you can play with Lady Tsunade later, now sit. She said with a sisterly authority. Reluctantly, the blonde complied, even though he pouted all the way through while he positioned himself on the blonde medic's lap. Why can't Sakura-chan come to study too? Because she already knows how to read, and you would get distracted. He mumbled a few complaints and proceeded to grab one of Tsunade's hands and put it on top of his head. completely soaking his hair in blood. Shizune didn't even twitch. Tsunade followed by having a silent panic attack, but her paralyzed state prevented her from even moving. Naruto then carries on by rubbing his cheeks on her bloodied hands and giggling childishly. Yes, family. She could only sigh in contentment at the sight of such a bloody scene. Moving past a fear is something bothersome. Tsunade would rather enjoy her life far away from anything so troublesome. We are here, Tsunade-sama. Sometimes she thinks, maybe, she's too deep into this rabbit hole to backpedal a few steps. Was it a mistake to stay in the village? Her decision to remain was born from the desire to give Naruto a semblance of a normal life. A place that he could call home and feel safe. She knew he would be safe here, he had her after all, and she would just blow to smithereens anyone that gives him a bad look. Wow, this is big tilde. But on the other hand, he was getting too pampered. Of course, she would hit him a little when he got a bit too out of control, but that was not the problem. The problem was when her puppy asked an honest request and not just for her to play with him. And he had asked for her to help someone. This way, Tsunade-sama. She should have seen this coming. Remind me again, Shizune, what was this case about? She had been too focused in the last weeks with overcoming her hemophobia that what she remembered from the file of this case was overridden by giggles and hugs from the two brats that just wouldn't let her relive her trauma in peace. The blonde didn't know if to punch them or thank them. Hyuga Hanami, 27 years old. She gave birth to a healthy baby girl about a year ago. Has been sick for at least 2 months. It started as weakening, then progressed to fever and coughing blood. Currently, she's having problems even standing up and has lost her appetite. In her condition, if nothing is done, she won't last long, probably a couple months more. Allergies? None that we're aware of. How's her body? Her lungs are still holding, but not for long, probably in a week or two we can expect lung failure. Medicine? We tried antibiotics as well as, and like that Shizune droned on Tsunade about the case. The blonde could spy from the corner of her eyes how the brat tilted his head in confusion at hearing so many complicated words being said one after another. Tsunade just patted his head, he melted at her touch as his shoulders sagged, clearly relaxed already. The Sannin complained under her breath. This is too big. The Hyuga compound was huge, even bigger than the Senjun compound. This was because, even at the founding of the village, the Hyugas were numerous, even more so than the Senju. She had heard once or twice her grandfather complain that they were like rabbits. Of course, at the time her mind didn't understand the comparison. It was midday, she had chosen to come at this hour on purpose. Nothing is more annoying than someone interrupting her lunch. She was being petty, sue her. Tsunade-sama, thank you. Hiyashi received them kneeling on the floor with his forehead hitting the ground. A part of her thought that maybe seeing this scene was worth all the hassle she had to go through. Another part of her wondered if she could unleash her puppy and Pinky on this compound as a form of revenge for all the inconvenience this circumstances had caused. Hell, she would even add Taunton to the mix. They could chase bushes all around here. Let's get on with it. The Hyuga head silently followed her command and opened the sliding door that led to the room. Inside was a beautiful yet pale woman. Her sunken cheeks did little to depreciate her natural charm. She was resting in what looked like a comfortable futon, cushioned in pillows that looked fluffy to the eye. To her side was a little girl, roughly the same age as her puppy, and as soon as Tsunade laid her eyes in her teal eyes, the blonde woman got a really bad feeling about this. Great, another girl. She couldn't help but snark internally. The medic just knew that the little blonde would find a way to befriend her. Curse her luck. Tsunade-sama. Even her voice sounded brittle. But Hyuga Hanami was a person who was recognized by her kindness and welcoming air. I'm really sorry to bother you. She bowed her head slightly and the little girl at her side hurriedly did the same, but with a blush tainting her ears. Nonsense, actually, don't even thank me, thank the brat. Rather rudely, she pointed behind her with her thumb. Naruto came just in time and waved his hand with a beaming smile on his face. He was the one that convinced me. Your husband's grovelings, though, those were rather amusing, that, I will admit. She finished with a good-natured smirk. The woman, Hanami, giggled. She would take the medic's lack of seriousness any day rather than the somber mood that her family had been having since she fell ill. Well then, she directed her attention to the boy that stood to Tsunade's side. Far from the shyness that she was used to from her daughter, The blonde didn't even attempt to hide behind the adult figure at his side. He didn't even glance at Tsunade's face, looking for reassurance of some kind, while squirming on his feet. He just beamed at her, sapphire eyes sparkling in confidence. "Thank you, young man, I don't know what would have been of me without you." Her words were soft and kind, making Naruto blush under her gaze. Now he squirmed. "It's okay, you don't have to worry, Ba-chan is awesome. She will sure put you in your feet before you even notice." He gave her a thumbs up, eyes closed with a toothy smile, making his face look like a fox. His words lacked the manners she was used to, yet there was no mean intention in his tone, just a natural way of speaking. She found it refreshing. She felt a tug on her side and turned to look at her daughter. Sweet thing that she was, little shy and small. The girl hadn't left her side since she fainted one morning, too scared to leave her side. Hanami smiled and came up with a plan. "Hinata," the girl looked into her eyes, unsure of what to do in the face of strangers. "Why don't you show little Naruto around the compound while I talk with the doctor?" The dark-haired girl supported her weight from one foot to another, nervous and blushing, but she nodded. Her daughter would make a friend, and a bright one if the read she had from Naruto was the correct one. "I hope you don't mind, Tsunade-sama." She turned to the medic and could swear she saw her left eyebrow twitch for a moment. She shook her head internally. Why would it bother her? Hanami decided that it was just her imagination. And no, of course not. And immediately realized that it wasn't. The way the words came out, forced, through her gritted teeth made it obvious that the medic did mind, though she couldn't understand her reasons. "Is everything okay?" She wanted to make sure. "Sir, I can play with her?" He interrupted the blonde loudly. Tsunade winced but didn't voice any complaint. She just nodded at him. Without letting anything deter him, Naruto sprinted to the girl, grabbed her wrist and dragged her outside, leaving the three adults alone. There was an awkward silence hanging in the air and Hanami was sure that Lady Tsunade was against the little blonde's action, but for some reason didn't voice it out. She decided to confront the situation in the best possible way. "Hiyashi, would you leave us alone?" she said with a chilled smile and a tilt of her head. "But, did you say something, Tilda?" "Nothing, dear." Head hanging low, the man left in low spirits. The blonde woman raised an unimpressive eyebrow and Hanami knew she had been had. "Tsunade-sama, you're dying." The Sannin cut through the subject without a care in the world. "Yes?" the Hyuga responded, weakly trying to sit up. She could feel how her back muscles stretched in a painful wile, screaming for her to stop her effort. Breathing heavily, she sat straight. "That's not a secret. Then we don't have time. Excuse me, whatever thing you want to talk or ask, it's not important." Well, that was rude. But she was in no position to say otherwise. The medic got close and hovered her green shining hands over her body. First her legs, then went for the midsection and proceeded to her chest. She went through her arms and finally her head. Tsunade sighed and gave her a serious glare. "You've been poisoned." Hanami swallowed thickly. She had had her suspicions, but to be told so. Hiyashi had a lot to think about. On the one hand, he had his hopes up. If someone would be able to get his wife better, that one would be Tsunade. On the other hand, if the same Tsunade said that there was nothing she could do, that would most definitely be a death sentence. He wasn't a fool, he knew the chances of life being kind to him were low, but no one could blame him for dreaming. "And those are sunflowers." He stopped mid-step. The sound of his daughter's bell-like voice drew his attention. Silently he set his foot on the ground and followed the path to her that directed him to her. "Mother usually took care of them, but since she had been in bed, I've been managing her garden." He hid behind the wooden wall that separated the living quarters from the garden, just out of sight. He activated his Byakugan and set his eyes upon the scene of her daughter kneeling in front of the garden that was his wife's most precious pastime, back hunching and her thin arms around her knees. The boy that he had recognized as Namikaze Minato's child stood beside her. Still, with eyes directed at her slumping form. "Your mom is gonna be fine," he said out of nowhere. Surprised, Hinata turned her head at him, eyes moistened and wide open. "Do you really think so?" "Huh." He gave her a big smile, the corner of his lips pushing his whiskers up. "My Ba-chan is awesome. There's nothing that she can't cure." He put his hands behind his head and smiled at the sky. "You can be sure she will even kick death's ass." Smiling ruefully, Hinata looked down to the floor. Chubby fingers started to pick a few lines of grass out of the ground. I hope that's true, she said lowly. You can bet your ass it's true. He gave her a thumbs up. Am my ass? Her shriek made Hiyashi quirk an eyebrow. She wouldn't be thinking, no, shaking his head, he decided to leave the kids alone and proceed to the kitchen. Thinking about procuring some tea to calm his nerves. He would forever be thankful to Uzumaki Naruto. Without him, he was pretty sure that he would have no way to convince Tsunade to take a look at his wife. And he was happy too, that his daughter was able to make a friend at least. Could you repeat that? Yes, Hokage-sama. The Chunin took a deep breath, preparing himself to repeat the scandalous news she just brought. Sarutobi didn't blame her, honestly, he could hardly believe it himself. There are reports of Danzo-san, of Danzo running from the grass country, apparently. Her eyes turned to the side, sliding into a glare with a hint of disgust in them. Kidnapping a young genin, a kunoichi. Some ambassadors came to the frontier asking for explanations, and requesting Danzo's head. Sarutobi wanted to bang his head to his desk. How did this happen? Did he fall on his head or something when Tsunade threw him? He shook his head, those thoughts were for another day. He had to deal with this now. His former teammate had, not only kidnapped a young kunoichi from one of their allied nations, he did it while being fully caught in the act. And the hell he had not killed, rendered her unconscious or interrogated her. No, of course not, that would have been too easy, he had kidnapped her. What should we do, Hokage-sama? The voice of the Chunin brought him back to reality, his daydreaming of him bashing the old warhawk's head to the wall being interrupted. What are they asking? His head. Yes, but I'm pretty sure they're asking for something else. Reparations, and the immediate return of the kunoichi, death or alive. They want her back. They want her back? At that last request, Sarutobi squinted his eyes. Why? Kusagakure wasn't known for being a village that would care for their shinobi. Why would they care for one of their ninja? She was just a genin, according to the info, so she wouldn't have access to any of the village's secrets. A keke genke? If it was so, they would have informed Konoha of the characteristics of the kunoichi. Considering that they were allies, there should be no fear of losing her. It hit him. She has something they don't want us to know. Hokage-sama? Sarutobi shook his head again. First, he had to deal with Danzo. Give the order, Danzo's capture is a priority as of this moment. The Chunin nodded and looked at him. And the kunoichi? The old man gave a tired sigh and massaged the bridge of his nose with his forefinger and thumb. And we rescue the kunoichi. The Chunin nodded again and the Hokage could swear he saw a hint of sadistic glee in her eyes. Days later, he would receive a report that a mob of dangerous kunoichis was seen embarking on a capture and rescue mission. 3 were authorized, the rest went for support. He just didn't care anymore by that point. The moon shone white down the streets of Konoha. The routes were empty except for the creepy figure of a bandaged man that was carrying the body of a younger female over his shoulder. His movements were silent and practiced, easily knowing where to step and when to advance. This shouldn't have taken so long. The old war hawk had to take the long road to arrive to the village that his old senile mind registered as his own. He wasn't expecting to be hunted by his fellow ninjas, so it was with a spit to the ground and grinding his teeth that he accepted that he was no longer welcomed on this ground. Not that it mattered, he had a plan, and the young girl in his arms would be the perfect bait. Sarutobi wouldn't know what hit him and Senju wouldn't be able to make a single move. It was perfect, in his mind, at least. As the saying goes, no plan survives the first contact with the enemy. Kakashi would be the first to admit that he wasn't the most sociable person of the bunch. Ever since the incident where he found his father's body, he had had difficulties mingling with peers. He would be reluctant to admit, though he wouldn't lie to himself about it, that if it wasn't for Guy he would probably be considered on high risk of desertion. Say what you will about Konoha and the ninjas in general, but bonds were considered important, as it was well known. Where your bond lays upon, there laid your true loyalties. So, with all this in mind, he wasn't surprised when the Hokage summoned him to have a talk. You're 3 hours late, Kakashi. Raspy and ancient the old man's voice was. To the inquiry Kakashi tilted his head. You see, there was this old lady. Are you perhaps talking about Tsunade? My, Kakashi? You could see the mischievous light shining brightly through the Hokage's aging wrinkled eyes. I didn't know you hated your health so much. Cold sweat trickled through his back, a healthy amount of fear raised in his consciousness. I certainly wasn't talking about Tsunade-sama, he said with a nervous eye smile. Well, let's hope she thinks the same, especially considering that you've been following her ever since she became a guardian to Naruto. And that was the crux of the conflict. He had wished to raise Naruto, to be there for the little boy. But Kakashi knew better than anyone that he was bordering on the functional part of the functional sociopath tag. He didn't get along with kids when he was a kid, and as an adult, he would probably be worse. Genin were different. You could give a kunai to a genin and tell them, now go and survive. He couldn't do that with a kid. Especially considering that he could die any day of the week, leaving the child alone and defend for themselves. So he just watched from a distance. And what would you think, that the week that he went on a mission was the week that Naruto disappeared from the orphanage? Curse his rotten luck with the people he cared for. He looked for him for weeks on end, yet, see and behold, that the person who found him was none other than Senju Tsunade, who proceeded to request, demand, the guardianship over the little fellow. Kakashi had no complaints on the matter. That didn't stop him from keeping an eye on the boy, stalking, just to make sure. Paranoia is a ninja's best friend. Whoever says otherwise is probably dead already. Do you need me for something, Hokage-sama? He quickly changed the subject. Smooth, Kakashi, really smooth tilde. Ah, yes, there's been information about an intruder He cleared his throat a bit. Someone came back? Was that a question? Yes, He coughed embarrassedly and Kakashi could read his lips as the Hokage muttered slowly. He got a few words like, Tsunade, getting to me, is this brainwashing? But decided to drop the topic lest he wished to end up going through a window and be leaving on his own volition, for a few weeks. Danzo has been spotted in the village. Immediately Kakashi tensed. He knew the old warhawk wasn't considered a missing nin, no matter how much Tsunade tried to convince everyone that he was one, in fact. But Danzo was the kind of man you wouldn't trust with a puppy, and Kakashi, being a puppy lover, had the responsibility of frowning at the mention of the man's name. Do you wish him to be dealt with? Kakashi asked without hesitation. No. For some reason the Hokage stood, eyes looking around wildly. He whispered loudly, not bothering if he was being heard. Damn you, Tsunade, you almost got me there. Ah, Kakashi finally understood. It seems Tsunade-sama has been applying some subtle compulsion techniques to get the Hokage to deal with Danzo-sama. He wouldn't put it past her, wouldn't judge her for it. Shinobis and kunoichis were dangerous. Being their leader was even more dangerous. Especially when you were dealing with someone as spiteful as Lady Tsunade. The woman could hold a grudge, and would not blink before acting upon it. Yes no, keep an eye out for him. It almost seemed like the Hokage was about to pull the hairs out of his head for a moment there. He has a hostage, yes. Hostage situation, proceed with caution. Your team has been assigned this mission for the duration of its completion. The main objectives are to secure the hostage and to capture the man known as Shimura Danzo. Kakashi nodded numbly. It was worrying, and fun, to watch Hokage fight the compulsion to give the order to kill Danzo, so he kept his mouth shut for the sake of the village, entertainment. Anything else, Hokage-sama? The old man produced a scroll and threw it to Kakashi while rubbing his forehead with his free hand. The details of the mission are in there. It's considered an S-rank mission that should be completed as soon as possible. Dismissed. With that Kakashi turned to leave but was interrupted before reaching the exit window. Call Tsunade-chan, I have a few words for her. He growled resentfully. Kakashi stuttered for a bit, but gathered his thoughts quickly. Are you sure? Why wouldn't I be? No, you're right, talking to her might be dangerous. Kakashi wasn't sure what was more dangerous. The chances of the Sannin brainwashing their leader even more, or how she would react after knowing that Danzo was back. He jumped out of the window before the old man could second-guess himself. He could only pray to the log that Konoha would survive the fury of a woman scorned. Sakura has been great as of lately. The 5-year-old could only smile while going to the park to play with her friend. Ever since Naruto's grandma had a talk with her parents, they haven't said a word against him, to which she was more than happy about. Happy, because she didn't have many friends, she didn't have any, and the one she had was the first one in her life. She was too shy to go up to the group of kids that usually played together in the park, and, for some reason she didn't understand, Those kids didn't want to play with Naruto. From her point of view, they were just mean and evil. Naruto called them bullies, and his grandma called them uglier words that Miss Shizune told her not to repeat anywhere else. Naruto got around it by saying the words when they were alone. At first Sakura was reluctant to do so as well, but he won her over by saying, "When we're older, we're gonna be needing those words, I just know it," and he had half convinced her about it by then. Though Lady Tsunade had caught them, once, while they were whispering those words to each other. Sakura was beyond herself and without thinking she muttered the word, "fuck," in a childish barf of fear at their situation. Lady Tsunade just looked at her and nodded sagely. Those words have more impact when saying them at the right moment, otherwise they lose their shock value if you voice them too often. The two kids just nodded at her in admiration as she went her way. Ever since then, they made a pinky promise to only use those ugly words when the scenario called for them. Sakura-chan. She could see her friend jumping up and down in the distance. At his side was Shizune-san with Tonton in arms, and not far off was Lady Tsunade. Sakura couldn't keep the smile off her face when she laid her eyes on them. It was odd in certain ways. While she loved her parents, she couldn't help but think of these people as her family too. Her little legs started running as she thought. Shizune with her kind and always patient smile. Lady Tsunade giving her a grumpy growl and an eyebrow twitch. Rude. Yet never had she told her to stop or distance herself from her. Tonton, their silent playmate and always willful victim of some pranks. And then there was Naruto, her first friend who had a shining smile and had always had a way of getting them in trouble. It could only be a month since she met them, but she could only haphazardly guess how her life would be without them. Naruto. She arrived at his side and gave him an unprompted hug to which he chuckled her affection away with a few pats on her back. She could hear Lady Tsunade's teeth grinding not so far from them and she could only giggle at that. She didn't understand why Lady Tsunade got even more grumpy when she was affectionate with her friend, but she found it extremely entertaining and, not to mention, that to her, Naruto was beyond huggable. Shizune was the first to interrupt their hug. "How are you today, Sakura-chan?" "Amazing." And with that, they started to play. The game varied from tag to playing ninja. The play-by-play changed from the ninja rescuing the princess, to the princess rescuing the ninja. They didn't care about a single thing. That was until a few hours later Naruto stopped in place. "Hey," he called, slowly and just above a whisper. "Who is that?" He pointed with his eyes instead of his fingers, and Sakura's subtlety followed his gaze with her own. They were as inconspicuous as 5-year-olds could be. "Which isn't much. I dunno," was her well-worded answer. In the corner of her eyes she could see it, them, a masked ninja, an Anbu if she was correct. Just on top of the roof, motionless, looking directly at them. It just felt weird, and she didn't like it, so she quickly grabbed her friend's hand and pulled him towards the pair of adults that she knew she could trust. Maybe Tsunade-sama would be able to scare them away? She was good with that kind of stuff. As soon as they came close Tsunade determined that she didn't like the situation. The worried look on Pinky was something she didn't often see. The sweet little puppy stealer Munchkin was a timid girl. But she had a rough and raw character under that terse skin, so that expression wasn't seen pretty often in the confines of their homes. Actually, it was the first time she had seen such an expression on her. She noticed how Sakura's eyes darted to a specific direction with every step, her puppy grumbling a bit as he made a pout with his eyes closed while she dragged him. Cute, she couldn't help but think. Yet she caught how his eyes darted to the same direction as the hussy every so often. So she sighed, knowing fully well that the moment she rolled her eyes to the cause of their distress, she would have to break something. Well, mentally, she scratched her chin. I am in the mood to do some wrecking. She still felt sour about the fact that she couldn't twist Danzo's neck well enough to break it before releasing him to the wild. Not for lack of trying. The bastard just had a tough neck. Maybe this was related to him? Tsunade would swear to the log that she would plant some trees if this was the case. So, with everything settled, the kids just a few steps away from her, Shizune looking at her with a worried eyebrow and Tonton oinking in attention, she looked at the cause of distress. Just over the roof, she spied the white color of an unmarked mask, not Anbu, at least not the old man's Anbu, and she smiled. She would have to get some seeds later.